The familiar world cracked wide open 30 years ago, when rifts began tearing through reality and monsters poured in from another dimension. At the same moment, some people awakened supernatural powers, and society quickly slapped a new label on them: hunters. Using those abilities, they slowly but surely purged streets and cities, driving the monsters back into the dark. When the threat faded, tension turned into boredom, and the hunters started measuring strength against each other instead. That was how the Hunter League was born. Spectacle, sport, and a war for status rolled into one. The brightest star of that arena became a legendary player, a guy named Chang Hyun. Stadiums roared, broadcasts pulled in millions, and every fight with his name on it became a full-blown event. But over time, money, attention, and zero consequences went straight to his head. Training gave way to alcohol, discipline turned into arrogance, and rivals started looking like trash mobs. So he missed the playoffs and became as useless to the fans as a streamer after a Twitch ban. Crushed by hate and the sudden silence around him, Chang went to meet the guildmaster. He was greeted with the smug face of a spoiled Pekingese and a verdict delivered without ceremony. Chang had screwed up, ratings had tanked, and the money that once justified his existence had dried up. The words hit like a slap, and his entire career shattered in under a minute. Swallowing rage and bitterness, Chang drifted home on autopilot, barely aware of the road. Every step echoed with the thought that his chance was gone and never coming back. All he could see was a body already on the decline and a closed door behind which his peak remained. Lost in those thoughts, Chang stopped watching his surroundings and forgot about danger. At the same time, a drunk driver, sleepless after a night with his mistress, was nodding off behind the wheel. The truck barreled down the road, ignoring signs, lanes, and people alike. As the emptiness of his life flashed through Chang's mind, headlights exploded in his vision and the semi slammed into him. In a split second, he thought he would give up everything for a chance to start over, to fix his mistakes, not take the wrong turns, and lead his team all the way to the top. Then the world went dark, and hot blood spread across cold asphalt. What happened to him was something every school kid secretly dreamed of: a return to the past. When Chang opened his eyes, he realized he was back on the very first day of his hunter career. The system instantly scanned his body, and his powers remained, as if death itself had been nothing but a bug. Chang immediately formed a plan, but his mother was still fiercely against the path of a hunter. She kept repeating that he should forget his fantasies and focus on a normal education. Overhearing his parents talk about his future, Chang decided to prove them all wrong. Luckily for him, the system displayed stats and skills visible only to his eyes. On paper, he was a kid again, but inside he remained a veteran with past experience and strength. In the morning, Chang headed to the arena to test his body and reclaim his combat instincts. Reality hit hard. Training without senior permission was strictly forbidden. Chang froze in the middle of the hall, realizing the path forward was blocked by someone else's rules. That was when a guy with the looks of a Disney prince, still untouched by life, approached him. It was Do Jun, his future partner on the battlefield. In the previous life, Do Jun had been a pretty boy and a crowd favorite, cruising his way to the top. Now, standing in front of Chang was just a regular student, only beginning to understand his powers. What saved the situation was that Do Jun belonged to an elite club and could sneak him into training. Do Jun himself was the smallest and weakest there, constantly feeling like an outsider. During sparring, Chang mistakenly picked an opponent who was too strong and hesitated for a moment. Pulling together his will and past experience, he realized he wouldn't make it without proper weaponry. Chang lunged forward, attacking with precision and cold focus while reading his enemy's weak points. He circled like a hunter around prey, denying even a second of breathing room. Blow after blow shattered the defense until the opponent collapsed in defeat. A shocked Do Jun never expected that outcome and began suspecting hidden tricks in Chang. Trying to copy what he had seen, Do Jun jumped into a fight and crashed hard almost instantly. Chang left the hall with a heavy feeling, clearly sensing the limits of his current body. He understood that without ranking up, his strikes would never carry enough power. His physical stats barely cleared the level of an average human, and the body demanded brutal, grinding work. The real problem lay elsewhere. He had no right to enter the training hall on his own. The only key to real training was the annoying yet useful Do Jun. His train of thought was cut short by a sharp phone buzz. It was that very same prince, inviting him out for dinner. Meeting at a cafe, Chang quickly realized the new acquaintance needed him just as badly. As a mentor. Soon, 3 of Do Jun's teammates joined them, and one turned out to be a witness to the blonde's recent humiliation. They didn't hold back, and casual dinner instantly twisted into a tense standoff. Chang openly roasted their weak jokes, calling them idiots to their faces. Not knowing who he was dealing with, Jisoo tried to flex authority like a kid raised on Andrew Tate podcasts. That attitude didn't sit right with Chang, and with a sharp move he slapped the punk across the face. 1 second later, the cafe exploded into a brawl where the power balance was obvious. Chang slipped past blows with ease and fired back clean counters, never letting himself get cornered. The all-seeing eye fed him risks in advance, mapping out deadly trajectories before they formed. His opponents showed off their abilities one after another, desperate to prove who ran the room. Sneaky techniques and reckless maneuvers made the clash harsher and more cinematic by the second. Chang kept striking without pause or doubt until his opponent collapsed, completely drained. Sirens wailed outside, and the arrival of police spelled serious trouble. Without wasting a second, Chang pulled a clean trick, creating the illusion that he was the victim and smoothly flipping roles with his opponent. The police cuffed Jisoo, meaning Chang's acting job landed perfectly. The next day, an unexpected discovery awaited Chang in the training hall. He encountered a skill that had never existed in his previous life. The system made it clear certain achievements unlocked entirely new talents. All he had to do was properly call out the next strike, and the power boost would activate. After training, a satisfied Chang returned home, only to be met again by his mother's distrust. His father, on the other hand, took his side and was ready to gamble alongside his son. The thought of competition pulled especially hard. With a massive cash prize on the line, Chang was ready to squeeze every drop out of himself to earn that money. The show was massive. From thousands of candidates across the country, only the best of the best would be chosen. 3 judges sat in an office, discussing participants and waiting to spot a true diamond in the rough. Submitting his application, Chang realized that beyond money, a shot at entering the academy was also at stake. The first stage was a written test, which he treated with open contempt. Filling it out on autopilot, Chang stepped into the second stage. And that was where things got real. Magic dragged him into a combat arena space with no option to refuse. The task was simple: wipe out all clones within 3 minutes. Any weapon was allowed, and Chang didn't hesitate, manifesting pistols in his hands. The fight kicked off, and he methodically sent shot after shot into enemy weak points. The judges weren't thrilled, as if he'd shown up to a medieval tournament packing a Call of Duty loadout. They were used to swords and crossbows, while firearms were considered exotic. Only fighters with massive internal energy reserves could handle them, and those were rare. Chang's unconventional style hooked the judges and forced them to watch closely. Still, they chose to save final judgment until all trials were complete. The next day, Chang approached the stadium, the place where his journey had begun years ago. Returning there stirred a warm feeling, echoing the days when he had been truly happy. Inside, the stadium buzzed as the stands filled with spectators hungry for spectacle. In the crowd, Chang spotted familiar faces of future Hunter League finalists. In that moment, he knew clearly. Losing was not an option. A flash of light hair caught his eye. Dujun had already saved him a seat. A bit lower, Chang noticed the battered Jisoo, whose mandatory 3 weeks in the hospital still weren't over. The guy had no choice. He had to impress the pro teams at any cost. By the selection rules, the Hunter League was split into 3 divisions, each with its own conditions and level of brutality. The first division faced trials inside the tower, while the second and third were sent straight into a virtual reality arena. Thick fog swallowed the stadium, like a cold, rainy London morning. Onto the arena stepped the host, Bruce Buffer style, his booming voice calling out the hunt for new stars. Everyone in the stands held their breath, waiting for the birth of the next legend. Suddenly, magic surged, and the virtual arena began assembling itself, stretching upward almost to the heavens. Before unleashing the main spectacle, the host flashed a charged grin and announced the judges. First came Ju Ra, a 3-time champion and the current leader of the Hunter League. Next was Lee Min-sok, the best athlete in the world and one of the tournament's judges. Third was Min Soo-hyuk, a calm yet outstanding figure among national team players. The hall buzzed in shock, like everyone had expected Taylor Swift and instead got a triple drop of top-tier judges. Chang knew perfectly well that he once stood on their level and could even trade blows with them. After the introductions, the host finally got to the point and announced the grand prize conditions. First place would take home 500 million won. And on top of that, the most powerful custom-made weapon forged in the legendary Moros workshop. Hearing the amount and the prize, Chang was briefly left speechless. To ordinary hunters, that weapon was practically a divine artifact, an unreachable dream that had to be earned. Chang instantly understood that with such a weapon, the road to greatness would shrink dramatically. Judge Ju Ara declared that out of the 100 hunters who passed the first two stages, only one would remain in the end. The first challenge would be a survival game in a dungeon, ending only when 20 participants were left standing. The rule was brutally simple: survive or die. With a cold smile, Chang was transported to the lands of lost souls, where he would prove his mastery. This place was painfully familiar. In his past life, he had spent a lot of time here. The lands of lost souls hid dozens of secret passages, and Chang knew the location of every single one. Hidden zones, traps, and core dungeon mechanics were basic knowledge to him. He paused for a second, calmly choosing where to start. At the same time, the judges in the arena were convinced this trial would tear Chang's mask off. They doubted his talent and believed he wouldn't show anything close to a true top-tier level. Yes, he had caught their interest, but his wins felt like luck rather than skill to them. Here they planned to test his adaptability, fundamentals, and most importantly, his survival instincts. The overall level of the participants was impressive, and the judges had prepared something especially ruthless. This trial was designed to mercilessly cut down the weak hunters. The judges were already feeling satisfied when they noticed one participant leaving the mission zone, and it was Chang. With his plan locked in, he headed straight toward the location of a hidden artifact. The artifacts were buried deep in bunkers, each guarded by its own monster. It was a shock to the judges that some rookie even knew where to look. Chang was certain that securing even one artifact would make victory only a matter of time. The judges' shock quickly turned into anger, like EA when players suddenly discover free loot. Suspecting foul play, they frantically searched for system errors but found nothing at all. The virtual reality was recreated from a real dungeon, and the hidden areas were supposed to be unknown to everyone. It was in this cache that ether was stored, an artifact so powerful it was banned by the Hunter League. Stopping Chang was impossible, since interference would shut down the entire match. As a small comfort, the ether was guarded by a powerful sentinel, one the judges believed was impossible to defeat. Chang knew every artifact had a different guardian, but he was confident he could beat any of them. Stepping into the hideout, he felt the damp smell and cool air settling against his skin. The realization that he had found the right place brought a brief sense of satisfaction. Something like a labyrinth stretched before him, and somewhere ahead, the Ether's guardian was already waiting. Chang wanted to deal with the enemy as fast as possible and claim his secret weapon. This time, his opponent turned out to be a magical cube, sealing the ether within itself. Confident in his strength, Chang stepped forward without hesitation and entered the fight with his head held high. The cube didn't hesitate and struck first. A slicing laser passed within inches of Chang. Leaping aside, he felt a flash of relief. This was an enemy he had faced before. Regaining his calm, Chang replayed old techniques in his head, searching for a way to break the technology itself, not the armor. The cube had stood in the tower's ruins for centuries, and brute force alone could never bring it down. Gritting his teeth, Chang drew his sword and charged, aiming to crack the shell and destroy the guardian from the inside. He managed to chip off part of the casing, but that was only the beginning. Chang quickly realized real damage could only be dealt at the exact moment the cube launched an attack. The guardian abruptly shifted shape, transforming into gigantic hands. They slammed down at Chang, trying to flatten him in a single blow. Sweat ran down his back, and he clearly felt it. The next strike would decide everything. At that moment, the cube began cracking from within right before his eyes. Dodging the blow, Chang hurled a broken shard straight into the core, finishing the powerful guardian in one decisive move. The fight was far tougher than he expected, and he barely stayed on his feet. Catching his breath, Chang moved toward his well-earned reward, the ether. Like any valuable artifact, the ether was sealed inside a massive golden chest. Opening it, Chang felt relief wash over him as he saw it was exactly as he remembered. Without wasting time, he integrated the ether into his weapon, following a perfected routine. Immediately, the system displayed a new achievement: Guardian defeated. Chang was fired up. Now he could properly use firearms, making future battles far easier. In his previous life, his power had been enough to wield guns without limits. Now his body was weaker, and mana barely covered each bullet. That was when a plan fully formed in Chang's mind. With ether, his ceiling rose to a whole new tier. He fired a test shot and winced at the recoil, realizing he still had a lot to learn. Meanwhile, the judges watched in total shock, buried under unanswered questions. There were no answers, like Netflix canceling a hit and pretending it was always the plan. After reviewing what they'd seen, the judges concluded Chang couldn't possibly have known about the cube or the ether. That kind of knowledge belonged only to legends, leaving them to wonder if he possessed foresight itself. They were stunned, that such a young mind could devise a plan to destroy the Guardian with its own fragment. Two judges acknowledged clear strengths, agreeing that Chang carried serious hidden potential. Only Judge Zhou remained skeptical, doubting him from the very start. Escaping the damp cave, Chang moved on to resume the main objective. Checking the rankings, he frowned. His rivals were clearly ahead. A quick scan showed that out of 100 participants, 60 were already dead. He could have rushed the finale by wiping out the rest, but that would draw far too much attention. Suddenly, hidden in the bushes like a mouse, he spotted Jisoo. Chang watched as Jisoo hunted with cold precision, like a lion stalking a zebra. The attack landed clean, and the victim collapsed, completely drained. Chang knew Jisoo possessed rare abilities, ones his vision could clearly identify. Skills like that would be incredibly useful on the road to the top. So Chang chose to bury the hatchet and proposed an alliance. Jisoo met the offer with pure hatred and, boiling with rage, turned to leave. Before doing so, he displayed his power, knocking Chang back with a single move. Chang straightened up, wiping irritation from his face. He had no intention of letting abilities like that slip away. A peaceful deal was impossible, and Chang decided to play it hard. Exhausted, Jisoo collapsed, begging for mercy yet still refusing to cooperate. Chang calmly drew his pistol, and the option to refuse vanished. While they worked out the terms, the sounds of fierce battles echoed nearby. Several participants had banded together to increase their odds of survival. Those hunters were soaked in the spirit of war, fighting for every breath. And suddenly, from behind the backs of the newly formed allies, a strange, ominous sound rang out. Turning around, they saw a sword flying straight at them, stopped at the very last second only by Jisoo's power. Gunfire, shouting, and forced ultimatums about cooperation made way too much noise. That chaos quickly attracted unwanted guests. Hunters of a higher rank and far more dangerous. Technically, temporary elite squads were allowed inside the dungeon, but the Hunter League had always been a team-based sport. Fighters like Jisoo, wielding gravity-based abilities, were worth their weight in gold within any group. Jisoo warped gravity and shattered enemy formations while Chang calmly mowed them down with his pistol. The judges exchanged glances more and more often, noticing how Chang reacted to attacks before enemy abilities even manifested. Meanwhile, inside the arena, a group of hunters was already closing in, clearly aiming to walk out as winners. Focusing on the live feed, the judges realized something truly exciting was starting right now. 4 players were moving in on 2 guys who had only just decided to fight together minutes earlier. In one of the attackers, Chang recognized a familiar face from his past life. It was Han Yul. He possessed overwhelming power and wielded telekinesis with confidence. Running combat scenarios through his head, Chang cycled through tactics, weapons, and possible mistakes. He quickly realized the most effective approach was to apply pressure through numbers. Exactly what their enemies planned to do. Fortunately for Chang, he had a gravity-controlling ally at his side, while he himself could shoot with perfect accuracy. Chang slowed for a brief moment, scanning the battlefield, jaw clenched. There were too many enemies. Compressing his will into a single point and syncing with Jisoo, Chang was the first to charge in. Disarming one enemy, he allowed himself a flicker of satisfaction, but the opponent remained eerily calm. Han Gyul, stripped of his sword, didn't retreat and kept defending as if this was exactly what he'd expected. Chang darted around him, firing his pistols almost non-stop, moving like a man possessed. The opponent had monstrous physical strength, and regular bullets felt like children's toys to him. Using telekinesis, he controlled multiple swords at once, yet even that might not be enough against sustained fire. Everyone in that clash had their own strategy. Some waited, some went all in, and all of them still had lessons to learn. Bullets screamed through the air at insane speed, and swords knocked them aside just as fast. At one point, Jisoo bolted like a Fortnite player at the first shot, leaving Chang alone against 4. One attacker stepped too close, and a bullet caught him instantly. Chang was already turning before the strike, firing at the spots where enemies were about to break from cover. He saved Han Gyul for last, a worthy opponent who made the fight especially brutal and tense. At the peak of the clash, the system abruptly cut the battle short and transported everyone to the stadium. It turned out the stage had ended, and exactly 20 hunters were still alive. The judges delivered a grand speech, declaring their pride in the awakened and promising even more spectacular trials ahead. League executives made their stance clear. They wanted first-generation hunters ready to defend humanity in the most dangerous dungeons. Each survivor was given a week to sharpen their skills and grow stronger. The system strongly recommended using the training hall at least once during that time. The next trial remained a mystery, but one thing was obvious. It would be far tougher than the last. The final ranking showed Chang in 5th place, and it seriously pissed him off. His self-criticism was interrupted by a cheerful blonde rushing toward him through the crowd. Turns out he had survived too, and now they were advancing to the next stage together. Onlookers talked about only one thing. Chang had used pistols, something rare even at this level. The prince was especially curious about where he'd gotten the weapons and why they obeyed him. Brushing it off with humor, Chang turned around and was blinded by paparazzi flashes. His pistol stunt instantly made him the hottest topic in the arena. He was asked to prepare for an interview, and his palms grew slightly sweaty. He wasn't sure how best to answer. The journalist's questions were predictably basic. Why he chose to become a hunter. Without a shred of doubt, Chang answered that there simply was no better candidate. Smirking reporters reminded him he had placed only 5th and asked about his future plans. Playing it off, Chang claimed the best part was still ahead. One question, however, finally threw him off balance. Did he see any worthy rival among the participants? Chang showed not a hint of hesitation and answered straight. There was no one here better than him. The name Han Gyol surfaced in his memory, and Chang clenched his fingers for a split second before restoring his usual confidence. Once free from the journalists, he headed to the cafeteria with Do Jun, finally catching a breather. Over lunch, they traded impressions of the battle, each finding plenty to say about both enemies and themselves. The blonde kept getting compared to Jisoo, and it clearly got under his skin, since Jisoo stuck in his mind as nothing but a shady type. Chang was far more restrained and cold, answering his friend's excited questions briefly and without emotion. He made it perfectly clear. The tournament winner would be him, and among the current participants, he saw no real rivals. Do Jun, on the other hand, was hyped about Han Gyol and Yu Haiju, seeing them as the true threats. In his eyes, they looked almost godlike. Beings on another level, unreachable and terrifyingly strong. Chang took those words as a personal insult and sharply cut his teammate off. He stated bluntly that Jun would achieve nothing if he kept placing others above himself in advance. On the way to the training hall, thoughts swarmed Chang's mind, making it hard to focus. Replaying fight after fight, he noticed one thing. Many competitors started with similar conditions. The real difference came later, when some stopped pushing forward while others kept pressing on. The truly strong didn't watch their rivals. They locked their eyes on the summit and never looked away. The flow of thoughts was broken by a young guy who ran up to him with pure fanboy energy. He introduced himself as Jin Han and excitedly started talking about Chang's clash with Han Gyol in the first stage. The guy said he had trained with Han Gyol back at the academy and that no one in their group had ever beaten him. He kept rambling non-stop, clearly hoping to hear Chang's take on that fight. With little interest, Chang introduced himself back, still not understanding why this conversation even mattered. It soon became clear that Han Gyol had been furious after the game ended. His teammates had practically dragged him away like security pulling Kanye off stage before he said something wild. Chang lingered longer than usual, trying to piece together everything he'd heard. Pulling himself together, he scanned the new acquaintances and immediately realized both were strong. Their stats were roughly twice his own. That realization hit Chang hard. He understood that his previous win had relied heavily on the ether. No one knew what awaited him in the next round, which meant preparation had to get even more serious. The next day, Chang caught Do Jun watching the TV show Hunters: The New Generation. The episode covered all tournament participants, including Chang himself. The judges reviewed the profiles one by one, and the first to appear on screen was Han Gyol's application. The guy looked like a Doberman and had dreamed of becoming a hunter since childhood. Yet something was always missing, and he failed the academy entrance exams twice. He answered questions with over-the-top motivation, like the hero of a cheap novel. Han Gyol never quit, mastered telekinesis, and genuinely believed hard work always paid off. Watching the screen, the guys were surprised at how fast the show had gone live. Fan comments about Han Gyol were split. Some admired him, others called him fake. Next on screen was Chang himself, the complete opposite of Han Gyol. Arrogant and self-assured, he answered questions sharply and without hesitation. He openly claimed that he was the hero and the future main star of the tournament. Dressed in a stylish coat with his chin held high, he said he had never faced real hardship. Chang confidently declared he would go all the way, no matter the cost. Two participants who looked similar on the surface, yet two completely different people. Chang and Han Gyol, one sharp and self-obsessed, the other seemingly there for personal growth. For a brief moment, Chang wondered if he was doing everything right. He brushed the doubt aside immediately. Worthy opponents still didn't exist in his eyes. Deciding he'd wasted enough time on the show, he turned off the broadcast knowing he could catch the replay later. Chang called the blonde over for training, deciding it was time to stop slacking. On the way, they talked about how a long and brutal road still lay ahead. Watching his teammate train, Dojun remembered a question that had been bothering him for a long time. Why Chang constantly trained only his legs and barely paid attention to the rest of his body, when fighting demanded total commitment. Thinking out loud, Chang began explaining the crucial role legs played in combat and survival. Chang pointed at the distance between them and calmly explained that a long-range fighter lives off speed. The moment you slow down, you've already lost. In the survival game, Han Gyul and other elite fighters had absurd levels of mobility. That mobility was exactly what let them dominate everyone else and stay consistently at the top. Unexpectedly, a man stepped into their conversation, looking like a master Shifu straight out of old-school movies. At first glance, it was obvious he was someone important. Only a serious figure would have unrestricted access to the training hall. He questioned why anyone would even train legs when most people preferred pumping biceps and posing like a gigachad in front of a mirror. The man was clearly baiting a reaction, and for a moment Chang hesitated and fell silent. Then he calmly replied that strong legs were the foundation of survival in battles against elite hunters. He defended his stance with confidence, citing examples from Western leagues and international arenas. It was his legs that let him close distance instantly, slip out of attacks, and deliver sustained, crushing pressure. The gray-bearded man smirked and held his gaze on Chang a second longer than necessary. He didn't take Chang seriously, calling him bold and foolish at the same time. According to him, that kind of confidence was exactly what led players to defeat most often. Turning away, the stranger tossed out one last piece of advice. Listen to your elders and stay humble. Left alone, the two teammates exchanged awkward glances, unsure why the man had even stepped in. Chang, however, understood that if someone was watching him now, it was the perfect chance to prove what he was worth. Later, it became clear that the man resembling Master Shifu was the chairman of the Hunter League, Lee Gyun-taek. He believed support techniques and raw offensive power were the core skills for long-range fighters. Lost in thought, the head of the association couldn't help recalling conversations from the distant past. Long ago, he had discussed the very same topic with a close companion, almost word for word. Back then, his friend had said bluntly that for long-range hunters, legs were the deciding factor. Mobility and strong legs meant being ready for any outcome in battle. Chang's words lingered in Lee Gyun-taek's mind, and he spent hours replaying them again and again. He tried to figure out who this kid really was, a self-absorbed rookie, or a fighter already thinking on an international scale. Meanwhile, Chang kept training relentlessly, and his growth was faster than in his previous life. Analyzing his body and stats, he noticed that his skills were genuinely improving. All it took was completing the new conditions and tasks thrown at him by the system. The blonde nearby watched Chang with almost religious admiration. Eventually, he worked up the courage to ask his new friend to train together for a bit. Chang didn't mind. It worked in his favor too. Deciding to mix business with pleasure, he suggested settling it with a duel. In the empty training hall, the two friends armed themselves with swords, sensing something interesting coming. The blonde was skilled with a blade and knew that against Chang's pistols, he wouldn't stand a chance. With light tension in the air, they charged at each other, steel crashing into steel. The clash rang through the hall, and the fight quickly turned intense. At one point, the blonde was thrown backward by a strange, inexplicable force. He couldn't understand why fighting with an ordinary sword had suddenly become so difficult. Looking up and catching Chang's sly grin, he realized something was clearly off. Chang had activated one of his abilities, magical weapon transformation. The battle turned flashy and intense, but with every passing second, the gap in power became harder to ignore. The prince couldn't figure out why he felt so weak, or why his usual techniques suddenly stopped working. The next instant, a surge of energy split the air, and a massive sword formed in his opponent's hands. Dujun instinctively tensed up, unable to retreat or raise his blade in time, his entire life flashing before his eyes. The blades collided, and after a crushing impact, the blonde crashed to the floor, completely drained. Chang, satisfied with his skills, couldn't hold back a light, almost cheerful smirk. Sitting on the floor and clinging to what little dignity he had left, the blonde noticed that smile. Doubt crept into his mind. Had they been holding back on him all along, like he was playing on easy mode while everyone else suffered on hardcore? The moment he looked up, his suspicions were confirmed, and the last scraps of confidence shattered. Catching a trace of sadness in his friend's eyes, Chang remembered why he'd started this training in the first place. Slipping into the role of a coach, he began explaining the finer points of choosing the right weapon for combat. Drawing on years of experience, Chang stated that for close combat, a light and fast blade was far more effective. Doubt lingered in the blonde's eyes. Could he really adapt his skills to something as light as a rapier? The training session came to an end, and the friends left the hall, discussing the fight and planning the next one. Suddenly, they noticed a guy with a shaved temple who had been watching them the whole time. One look at his expression made it obvious. His mood was openly hostile. It was Kim Jin-sung, who had taken 5th place in the second trial alongside Chang. The angry grin and tense stance gave away irritation mixed with poorly hidden envy. Chang, never one to miss a chance for conflict, deliberately provoked the newcomer. He took the bait easily and agreed to fight without a second thought. As always, the self-satisfied Chang was confident in his superiority and expected no real trouble. The guys returned to the hall, each fully convinced of his own skill. Kim Jin-sung turned out to be anything but simple, and in sheer arrogance he could rival Chang himself. Realizing he was facing the best of the rookies, Chang hesitated for the first time, but had no intention of backing down. Like lions fighting for dominance of the pride, they charged at each other. Sharp dodges and lightning-fast blade strikes flashed before the eyes. Both moved at insane speed, calculating their next move on the fly. In a single moment, Chang was nearly disarmed. The opponent was terrifyingly strong, and only the ether allowed him to deflect a lethal blow. Kim Jin-sung's trump card turned out to be his mastery of telekinesis. But Chang had anticipated that trick and managed to outplay him completely. Chang hurled a knife at his opponent, and in the split second his guard slipped, 3 more followed right behind it. The knives flew straight and true, one after another. But the telekinetic opponent calmly knocked them out of the air. Chang never slowed down, and only at the very last moment did it become clear that one blade was moving on a different trajectory. Certain of his victory, Chang allowed himself a brief spark of pride, unaware that the fight was being closely observed. Among the piercing stares were Judge Min-sok and an important figure standing beside him. They carefully analyzed Chang's movements, growing more convinced that he possessed hidden abilities. It was obvious that pulling off something like this was impossible without precise understanding of an opponent's power. Comparing this fight with previous trials, the observers suspected Chang might have the rare gift known as the Eye of Analysis. One of them, a sharp-looking man in glasses, firmly decided to claim Chang for his team at any cost. Sometime later, Chang and the blonde headed back to training, and this time the blonde was fired up to the max. Brimming with confidence, Chang teased his friend, dragging him into yet another showdown. He pushed him to fight, insisting he'd gotten stronger and that the clash would be genuinely exciting. His friend's confidence intrigued Chang, but he treated it with the same seriousness a UFC champion would give a harmless school sparring match. A few days later, all participants of the survival stage were gathered by the judges in a massive hall. Sitting at the tables, no one understood what was about to happen or why they had been summoned. The judges stepped onto the stage to review how the players had spent their week-long break before the next trial. They saw talent and potential in every one of them, yet understood that all still had room to grow. That was why the decision was made to assemble a team of mysterious mentors. 3 grim figures appeared on stage, giving off the vibe of a full-on Avenger squad. The first to speak was Lee Sung-jin, who looked suspiciously like Tony Stark. He announced his hatred for overconfident idiots and looked at Chang the way a coach looks at a TikTok fight guru. Based on past results, the judges began calling players one by one for team assignment. Chang was the first to step forward, ready to learn what path awaited him. Unexpectedly, he was assigned to the close combat team, a twist he clearly hadn't prepared for since he considered himself a long-range fighter. Several other strong and promising competitors were placed in the same group. Among them was Yoon Han-gyul, whom Chang had already fought in the dungeon. There was also the stunning Yoo Hye-ju. Her abilities were still a mystery, but the blonde watched her with open admiration. The harsh mentor immediately ordered them to forget everything they had learned before. He declared that right now each of them was weaker than even 3rd Division hunters. Those fighters could already battle freely in the air, using mana to maintain flight and mobility. That was why the first thing he intended to teach them was aerial combat. Chang, as always, stayed confident and ready to prove how good he really was. The mentor, however, never missed a chance to shove the rookies' weaknesses in their faces. He openly considered them unfit for real combat under harsh conditions. The constant shouting and pressure wrecked Chang's focus, fueling irritation. The so-called prince had it especially rough. He was in the same group and could barely stay airborne. Playing the role of the ultimate coach, Chang told his friend to come down. At that pace, he wasn't getting anywhere. Ignoring the fact that the mentor was clearly testing them, Chang started his own training session. He explained how the body should behave in midair and how to control the flow of mana. To make it clearer, Chang demonstrated everything with his own movements. To everyone's surprise, the blonde picked it up instantly. Proud of himself, he thanked Chang and believed more than ever that he had real talent. The mentor snapped, deciding the guys were treating everything like a game. He wanted to put the brats in their place and show who the real boss was. The trainer quickly concluded that Chang was an overconfident idiot and chose to personally test his strength. As the players prepared, tension filled the judge's chamber. Judge Ju A-Ra had considered Chang a fraud from the start and decided it was time to test him. She had deliberately placed him in the close combat team, expecting him to crack. The arrogant rookie irritated her, and she wanted proof he wasn't invincible. Back in the training hall, the mentor assigned the first brutal test. The task was to reach an aerial anchor suspended 100 meters above the floor. With a sly grin, the mentor waited for these cocky rookies to fail. Under his command, the trainees launched into the air, struggling toward the anchor. Han Gyul was the first to catch the mentor's attention, using his abilities to get closer than the rest. The mentor was pleased, already seeing the joy of training such a fighter. Then his gaze snapped to Chang, who was weaving a support rope out of thin air with his abilities. None of the trainees could believe what they were seeing, watching his actions in stunned silence. From high above, the mentor was shocked by how fearlessly Chang moved at such altitude. One wrong step, and the kid would have been plummeting downward at insane speed. For a brief moment, the mentor wondered whether he should save the self-absorbed fool. But Chang wasn't that simple, and his skills once again proved their worth. He formed a step in midair and managed to stabilize himself. Regaining balance, Chang threw a hook and latched onto the loop. The stunned mentor stared up at the audacious rookie, completely speechless. A satisfied Chang sat above, looking down like he was already picking the soundtrack for a victory YouTube Shorts clip. After that, the entire team was sent to a classroom for theoretical lessons. Chang, as usual, showed boredom and open disrespect. He cared about only one thing. What could they possibly teach him if he was already the best? The mentor seethed with rage, but for Chang it was just background noise. Waking from a half-doze during the lecture, Chang found a strange note in his pocket. He took it as a personal challenge and, of course, decided to check it himself. Clutching the note, he went to the designated location and waited for its author. After waiting a while, Chang assumed it was a prank, until his abilities flagged something strange beneath his feet. That something turned out to be a hidden underground entrance, and he carefully peeked inside. Curiosity won, and Chang began descending into the darkness. Deeper in the secret area, he noticed a figure standing in the shadows. As he got closer, Chang recognized the chairman of the Hunter League, the same man he had argued with about leg training. The chairman was pleased that the kid had correctly read his hints and directions. Chang bristled, unable to understand how anyone was supposed to decipher anything from that stupid scrap of paper. Lee Gyun-taek admitted that Chang's training and insane mobility had caught his interest. Lee Gyun-taek held his gaze on Chang, as if already measuring how far the boy could really go. The chairman, without raising his voice, remarked that the association was already placing serious bets on Chang. Chang's heart sped up despite himself. He needed to know why someone this influential had summoned him personally. Lee Gyun-taek walked confidently to a massive desk whose surface clearly hid more than paperwork. With a smooth, almost theatrical motion, he activated a hidden mechanism, and the desk split open to reveal a secret vault. Before Chang's eyes lay priceless artifacts and top-tier weapons, glowing with a cold, sacred light. Chang let his gaze slide across the arsenal, then returned it to the chairman, waiting for the real reason behind the meeting. Among the trophies, he spotted a sword of extraordinary beauty, the very blade he had wielded in his past life. Memories of hard-fought battles and victories surged back, and the thought of holding that sword again burned pleasantly in his mind. The chairman cast him a cryptic look and offered to let him borrow one of the trophies for a time. He added that any weapon here was far more valuable and fascinating than the tournament's grand prize. Chang was growing tired of the drawn-out performance and directly asked what they truly wanted from him. The chairman was taken aback by the tone. Most students would have licked boots faster than Elon stands under a fresh tweet. Finally, it became clear. The chairman was offering Chang the position of an official association hunter. Chang listened carefully, understanding that acceptance meant he could claim any of the displayed trophies. Intrigued yet irritated, he asked what real benefit he would gain from such a deal. The chairman hesitated. Usually people would die for an opportunity like this. But standing before him was no ordinary student, just a youth clearly overestimating his own strength. Promises of reaching the summit sounded convincing, yet they failed to move Chang. He cared only about his own power and the path he carved himself. As he left, he said goodbye with such boldness it was like calling the gym coach bro, and walking out without a shred of respect. The head of the association remained standing there, stunned by both the audacity and the talent of the boy. Exiting the underground hall, Chang headed to his next lesson. Being late wasn't ideal. At the entrance, a panicked blonde greeted him, already imagining the worst. Chang calmly took his seat, knowing no one would expel them over minor tardiness. Casually, he mentioned that some old man had made him an interesting offer. But he refused, since he intended to become champion even without the offered weapon. Deep down, he was building a far more cunning plan, to become so valuable that future offers would be on an entirely different level. Soon after, a new test was announced to measure progress following mentorship training. Winners would advance to a higher tier, with a rare mana stone as a bonus reward. The stone was incredibly valuable and perfect for Chang. He had already mentally claimed it. The judges declared the trial would be broadcast live, and the top scorers would gain the right to choose their own teams. Participants were divided into 3-on-3 squads, and combat would take place strictly in the air. In the judges' chamber, debate flared. Some shook their heads at Chang's attitude, others pointed to his results. Yet they all understood one thing. He wasn't a team player, and this challenge would test him hard. The players gathered in a large hall, waiting for further instructions. In the judges' room, Ju A-ra admitted she hoped to see Chang fail. She believed his persistence and knowledge were strong, but his isolation made him vulnerable. She also knew long-distance endurance wasn't his best trait and planned to exploit that. The other judges acknowledged his talent but agreed. His arrogance could become his weakness. Chang entered the room filled with participants to select 2 teammates. In front of the cameras, he chose coldly, like drafting NBA players while already picturing himself on a 2K cover. 2 familiar faces immediately caught his eye. Strong and reliable candidates. Chang evaluated them with a satisfied smile, like a strategist assembling the perfect squad. Kim Jin-sung, whom he had recently defeated, was furious that they now had to work together. He couldn't forgive either the loss or how stylishly Chang had outplayed him. The second pick was Jisoo. With him, Chang already had experience from a temporary alliance. Turning on the charm, Chang declared he would handle the dirtiest work himself. Within seconds, he was clearly outlining a battle plan and the path to victory. The trio formed a tight circle, discussing strategy like kids sharing a dangerous secret. No one could tell whether Chang was explaining tactics or revealing something far more serious. In the next instant, the guy with the shaved temple jumped back in shock. Terror echoed in his voice, as if what he heard had flipped his entire world upside down. Chang confessed he had come from the future and asked them to trust him. He warned them that a brutal trial lay ahead and that now was not the time for mercy. Minutes later, the 3-on-3 battle began. One rule only: fight in the air, touch the ground, and you lose. Chang paused for a second on the ground, scanning the arena, anxiety mixing with cold certainty. The battle kicked off, teams spreading across the vast space while maintaining contact through earpieces. Chang had already ordered his team to retreat at the first sign of enemy contact. There were only 3 teams in the arena, but the space was so massive that encounters weren't easy. He began ascending slowly, yet the calm didn't last long. Arrows rained from all directions, and Chang sharply dashed backward, evading the assault. Ignoring pursuit, he headed toward the center of the towering structure, just as he had planned from the start. With predator precision, he calculated the distance and prepared to leap. Pushing off, Chang shot upward and moments later landed atop the structure. Securing his position, he contacted his team and confirmed readiness. Ensuring his allies had eyes on him while he remained unseen by enemies, Chang gave the signal. Standing at the arena's highest point, he fired into the air, deliberately drawing attention. It didn't take long. Jin Han, the same guy from the cafeteria, arrived quickly. He seemed surprised to see Chang alone in such a dangerous zone, but smiled, declaring him the first target. Slightly scatterbrained, Jin Han immediately informed Han Gyul of the encounter through comms. Chang cast a quick glance around and accelerated. Staying here too long was suicide. Jin Han, still friendly, began explaining that he had studied close combat tactics against shooters. Chang grew tired of the chatter. The opponent was stalling like he was waiting for a character buff update. Ever since their last meeting, Jin Han had wanted details about the fight with Han Gyul and promised to ask again after this one. Expecting a harsher assault, Chang easily deflected the first attack. To maintain advantage, he needed to control distance. and there was plenty of space here. Using a mana thread, he rose higher, claiming a superior attack angle. The opponent immediately followed, still talking even midair. Chang maneuvered along an aerial loop, preparing a strike with ninja-like precision. At the right moment, he twisted sharply and fired, aiming to end it fast. But Jin Han was agile and moved confidently even in the air. The bullet was deflected by his blade before it could land. Chang mentally acknowledged. This opponent deserved respect, and a single pistol wouldn't be enough. Continuing his maneuver, he felt his mana reserves might not last for a quick finish. At that moment, Han Gyul joined the fight, burning for revenge. Face twisted with fury, he charged recklessly, abandoning calculation. Chang calmly tapped his mic and sent a coded signal to his team. Han Gyul and Jin Han increased the pressure, closing in for a combined strike. That was when Chang gave the order to launch the counterattack. The opponents thought it was a bluff and activated telekinesis, hurling their weapons forward. Chang kept dodging, knowing the climax was seconds away. Enraged enemies flung blades at him with the confidence of schoolyard haters, blind to the trap. A second later, confidence turned to shock. A gravity attack crashed down on them. Chang's team entered the fight in perfect sync, showcasing true class. Shouts erupted from the stands as Chang suddenly began to fall. But in the same instant, the opponents also lost their footing and dropped after him. From cover, Chang's allies stripped the enemies of their ability to stay airborne. Just as it seemed they would all crash, a dense air cushion formed beneath Chang. His opponents continued falling, and the system soon registered their defeat. Chang fired an air hook and climbed out of the cushion, landing as the victor. After catching his breath, Chang linked up with his team and admitted that, after the gravity strike, his body had glitched for a second. It felt like an invisible press had crushed him from all sides, but survival meant tanking the pain and pushing through. Honestly, Chang's plan wasn't some galaxy brain masterpiece. It all hinged on knowing both enemy and ally abilities inside out. What really made it work was what they had agreed on beforehand. Chang played bait, lured the enemies high into the air, and Jisoo dropped the gravity hammer at the perfect second. At the same time, their third teammate caught the falling Chang with telekinesis, and the combo landed almost flawlessly, like they had rehearsed it for weeks. Still, celebrating was premature. The game wasn't over, and plenty of opponents remained. And chances were high that many had already clocked their tactic and wouldn't fall for the same trick twice. Moments later, the system announced that a significant number of hunters had already been eliminated. It turned out most of them had been taken out by Hyo-ju. The seemingly fragile girl had revealed herself as a true sky predator. Chang's team was officially declared the round's winner, and everyone understood how much work had gone into that result. In the aerial bloodbath, Hyo-ju had fought as part of another team and mercilessly crushed anyone who underestimated her. Overhearing the defeated opponents, Chang was surprised. They openly admitted defeat and called his maneuver impressive. Even Han Gyul apologized to his teammates, admitting he should have been more cautious knowing Chang's abilities. Hearing that, Chang remembered his past life. Back then, he raged at failures until he learned to analyze mistakes instead of self-destructing over them. His thoughts were interrupted by Kim Jin-sung, still recovering from the brutal round. He approached and forced out an apology for his earlier harsh words. After saying it, he hurried away, as if another second would have shattered his pride. Meanwhile, the beautiful judge remained in total shock, unable to believe Chang had won so confidently. She had counted on his weakness in close combat to expose him, yet he had outplayed everyone with pure strategy. It amazed her how many hidden layers one player could carry. Even knowing others' abilities, executing such a plan wasn't easy. Later, everyone was gathered again in the arena for the official results of the first round. Chang's squad was labeled Team B and announced as the top scorers, earning the Mana Flow Stone as their prize. The guys celebrated the trophy, while Chang quietly noted that step one of his long-term plan was complete. He expected the artifact to awaken more of his hidden power and accelerate his growth. The judge reminded them that every tournament has its eliminations. Without losers, survival games don't exist. The scoreboard began listing the names of those who had fallen due to weakness or mistakes. First among the eliminated was the blonde Kim Do-jun. However, the losers were given a shot at redemption. They would form teams and defend their territory for 1 full minute. Since the participant count was uneven, each defeated player could invite one winner to join their side. The judge clarified they had only 1 day to choose and prepare. After the ceremony, everyone moved to the main hall where some were already forming alliances. Others stood around lost, unsure who to approach for support. Then the blonde, like a golden retriever spotting its owner, rushed toward Chang with a desperate look. He was praying his friend wouldn't turn him down or leave him alone before the next trial. Chang coldly stated he had no intention of joining this circus. But the prince didn't give up. He practically clung to Chang, shaking him and begging for help. In the end, the puppy eyes worked, and Chang reluctantly agreed, hinting he was doing it mostly out of boredom. Besides, he had his own agenda, to field test the Mana Stone. He set one condition: absolute obedience and zero improvisation. The prince nearly bounced with joy, convinced he now had a real chance. Left alone, Chang studied the Mana Stone carefully, like a villain mastermind calculating every move. Remembering his past experience with such an artifact, he swallowed it without hesitation. His skills surged instantly, his rank climbed, and his abilities took a noticeable leap forward. He felt a warm wave of power spread through his body, reaching every single cell. The system registered enhancement even in rare skills, including the ability earned from defeating the Ether Guardian. Now Chang felt stronger than ever, ready to face whatever trials awaited. After mapping out a plan for the brutal day ahead, he finally allowed himself to relax and fall asleep. That night, a disturbing dream from his past life took hold. So vivid it made him want to wake up immediately. In the dream, he saw the beginning of his journey and how the director had accepted him into the Hunter League. But in the nightmare, the director appeared as a sinister lizard, needing only one thing from him: to awaken his true power as quickly as possible. In the dream, Chang felt small and powerless again, like the whole world was crushing down on him. And in that exact moment, his full power awakened in blazing bloom. But when the director learned of it, he only laughed wide with his serpent mouth, and that laughter echoed like someone else was pulling the strings behind Chang's success. Even in the dream, Chang clearly remembered how, after activating his power, he kept rising, winning, lifting trophies, proving his dominance to everyone. Yet that success was short-lived. Ratings crashed, fans turned away, and the summit became untouchable. Chang woke up in a cold sweat, breathing hard and grateful it was only a dream, not a replay of his downfall. The bitter memories still pulsed in his head, but now he had a second chance, and he wasn't about to waste it. He replayed his recent battles and admitted to himself that he had progressed further than most rookies in that time. Still, he knew the truth. His victories weren't built on pure skill alone, but also on cunning and artifacts. After absorbing the Mana Stone, his strength had clearly spiked, and Chang felt ready for new feats, finally slamming the door on his past life. Pulling himself together, he headed to meet his teammate. Today's trial would be serious. At their meeting, the prince enthusiastically declared he had prepared a detailed plan, from warm-up to final strategy. The blonde laid out his scheme with passion, but it sounded painfully naive, and Chang barely held back a grin. Chuckling to himself, Chang realized he would once again have to carry the leadership in this duo. A few hours later, the friends arrived at the stadium. The trial was about to begin any second. In an instant, space warped, dragging them into a parallel reality for the mission. Scanning the terrain, Chang immediately began adjusting the strategy for capturing the zone. He explained the plan in detail to the prince. They would act as a pair, and one mistake meant defeat. The blonde disliked the idea. Marching into the stronghold of the strongest players felt like suicide. The prince still considered Yoon Han-gyul and Yoo Hye-ju the most dangerous participants and openly feared them. Chang coldly replied that with that mindset, he had already lost. Fear was the worst ally in battle. They were given only minutes to prepare and agreed to dash toward the central building right after the start. Chang launched forward, nearly forgetting his friend, convinced he had mastered aerial step and anchor better than anyone. His mobility was meant to secure the prime position first and stall the enemies. Yoon Han-gyul and Yoo Hye-ju were also heading for the center and noticed Chang leaping through the air. The girl, irritated, recalled how his earlier provocation had forced her into fighting a swarm of opponents. She believed that without his stunt, she wouldn't have wasted so much energy on unnecessary clashes. Han-gyul felt ashamed of his previous recklessness and promised not to act impulsively again. The girl backed him up, telling him to stay sharp and keep his cool. Han-gyul admitted that Chang came up with something new every time, and underestimating him was dangerous. Yoo Hye-ju confidently reminded him that she had already defeated 3 players without any allies. She believed that in close combat, one precise strike would be enough to eliminate Chang and strip him of mobility. Han-gyul didn't argue. He knew her stubbornness was nearly unbreakable. The partners moved forward, determined to end the game as victors. Meanwhile, Chang, bored while waiting for the prince, spotted a few players and decided to test his upgraded power. A girl and her ally were calmly walking down the central street, unaware of the crosshair hovering above them. The shot rang out sharp and clean. The bullet landed perfectly, like Pro Mode had auto-activated. Chang noted that this shot felt different. Stronger, cleaner, clearly boosted by the ether effect. The second player tried to react, but the next bullet caught him as well. In his earpiece, the prince nervously reported hearing gunfire, but Chang calmly replied that he had everything under control. They agreed to regroup on the second floor of the nearest building and continue clearing the area. While waiting for his ally, a thought crossed Chang's mind. Eliminating one more opponent could secure extra advantage. In the judge's chamber, Ju A-ra once again found herself unsettled by Chang's behavior. Her colleague insisted that the boy was displaying outstanding shooting talent. The judges admitted that Chang had shown promise since day one, yet Zhou remained skeptical. What troubled her was why someone with that level of skill needed the forbidden artifact. Ether. His choice of pistols also seemed odd to her, since they were rarely used even in training. At that moment, a rough voice cut through the discussion, reminding them that enhanced abilities often unlock new talents. It was the chairman, who had personally come to observe Chang. The judges were surprised that the head of the association had taken interest in this rookie. The chairman calmly remarked that Chang had rejected his offer to join the league, adding with a faint smile that the boy was truly bold. A moment later, the chairman added that he would have gladly raised the stakes if he had known in advance just how strong this kid would turn out to be. With a sly smile, he hinted that he hoped fate would cross his path with Chang again under very different circumstances. The judges were clearly intrigued, wondering what kind of chess match this silver-haired strategist was playing behind the curtains. Meanwhile, back in the trial, the flustered blonde finally reached Chang, still out of breath from the frantic climb. Chang gave a short command to move up to the second floor of the towering building. That was where their plan was meant to run flawlessly. Entering a room with shattered windows, the prince spotted Chang crouched behind the sill like a predator waiting in ambush. The building across the street looked empty, and Do-jun exhaled, thinking they had caught a lucky break. He started assuming the others were hiding in the shadows, trying to stall until the final signal. Chang suddenly asked who seemed weaker, Yu Hyo-ju or Han Gyol. At first, the blonde didn't get it, but once the meaning clicked, a chill ran down his spine. He was basically being asked which monster he was willing to face, even though he didn't feel capable of beating either. Chang calmly clarified that he only needed to hold for 1 minute. Everything else would be handled. He broke the plan down step by step, leaving no room for confusion. The blonde's job was to stall one enemy for exactly 60 seconds while Chang secured the capture point. The prince was visibly nervous, unable to imagine enduring pressure from the strongest players. Chang, on the other hand, looked completely confident, both in himself and in the hidden potential of his ally. The blonde followed him like someone marching toward a sentence, unsure of what was about to unfold. Reaching the capture point, a tight room in the center of the building, they examined every detail carefully. The system warned that if any opponent breached the room, their team would be instantly eliminated. The enemies were already closing in, and their energy made it clear they were ready to win at any cost. The girl from the opposing team simmered with irritation. To her, Chang was nothing but an arrogant upstart. Their objective was simple: locate and seize the point defended by Chang and his partner. But first, they had to pinpoint its exact location. Pausing, they decided to carefully analyze what Chang might attempt at the point. Han Gyol reminded her that in the previous fight, Chang had relied on a powerful artifact. Without it, he would have lost. He also pointed out Chang's flawless focus and lightning mobility, which had enabled that dangerous maneuver. However, inside the confined capture room, space for movement would be limited, meaning Chang's mobility advantage would shrink. The girl pondered so deeply it looked like she was decoding an Illuminati conspiracy theory, yet still concluded Chang was definitely scheming something. She asked Han Gyol to hear her out. In her view, Chang always played ahead of the curve. Most likely, he expected other teams to attempt the capture first, then plan to interfere at the perfect moment. In a closed space, his aerial mobility wouldn't dominate like before, so he would rely on cunning. Shocked, Han Gyol wasn't sure what move to make. Time for hesitation was running out fast. The girl chose not to charge in recklessly, but instead aimed to disrupt Chang's strategy. As they approached, the system showed that 3 players had already entered the zone, and none had come back out. That meant Chang hadn't fled into the shadows, but had coldly eliminated anyone bold enough to push in. In the chaos, the opponents had almost forgotten that holding the point required only 60 seconds. Anger slowly overtook the girl. She couldn't grasp how Chang kept calculating everything. Meanwhile, Chang and his partner executed their prearranged scheme with precision. The moment someone appeared in the doorway, Chang snapped a headshot without giving them a step forward. If things got messy, the blonde jumped in to finish the job and secure the position. The prince grew increasingly tense, realizing the most dangerous enemies hadn't even shown up yet. Suddenly, the door burst open with a crack, and one bold attacker stormed in with a shout. Chang fired without hesitation, and the intruder collapsed. But right behind him, another enemy lunged from the shadows with a spear. Chang kept firing steadily, yet the opponent skillfully dodged, weaving behind columns. For a second, silence fell, and the spiky-haired guy reappeared in the doorway. Chang knew it was time to let the blonde prove himself in close combat. But out of nowhere, a girl with knives sprang from behind. Two attackers moving in perfect sync. Maxing out his focus, Chang moved like John Wick and dropped both with a single decisive burst. Two more enemies were down, and Chang felt the plan unfolding exactly the way he had envisioned. 32 seconds remained. Just over half a minute, but in survival games like this, that was practically an eternity. The blonde felt relief creeping in, sensing victory was close, but in Chang's eyes burned a different objective. Not just to hold out, but to wipe the field clean. As if fate had been listening, their main enemies stormed into the room the very next second. The ones they had been waiting for from the start. Throwing doubt aside and locking in, the guys took defensive positions, knowing the decisive seconds had begun. Chang drew both pistols and fired with icy precision, like he had already calculated every possible trajectory. Yet Yu Hyeju and Han Gyeol skillfully deflected the attacks, moving in near-perfect sync. Suddenly, the floor cracked beneath their feet. The building began collapsing like a house of cards caught in a storm. The girl shot a glance at the timer. It was still ticking, which meant the match wasn't over. For a split second, everyone hesitated. Hold the point inside a collapsing building or shift position? Bullets tore through the smoke one after another, and each shot found its mark. The number of eliminated players rising fast. Through the thick dust, the girl couldn't tell where the shots were coming from or where Chang was positioned. Chang knew full well that a direct, open fight against all of them would be rough, so he chose to fight smarter. Having pre-boosted his weapons with ether, he had raised their power and penetration. Activating every skill, from analysis to trajectory calculation, Chang applied pressure without panic. The battle painfully echoed his past, the moment his team had begun losing rank in a brutal slide. Memories surfaced of teammates falling into traps one by one. Back then, only Chang had escaped alive, and he had sworn never to let that happen again. In that fight too, he had collapsed a building and hunted the enemy team through the rubble. Fans had witnessed an insane spectacle. Chang nearly carried the team solo to victory. But the miracle never came, and the team still crashed down like an artist's career after one lucky hit. The fatal flaw had been lack of mana. His weapon had failed at the critical moment. Now it was different. His mana reserves were full, and he refused to repeat old mistakes. In the end, Chang and the blonde emerged victorious, clearing the arena down to the last opponent. The stunned judges could hardly believe someone had eliminated every participant in a single stage. Chang hadn't just defended the capture point. He had turned defense into total domination. For the first time, the judges openly admitted he was fighting at a professional level. Yet one question lingered. How had he seen his enemies through that dense cloud of dust? After deliberation, the judges concluded that Chang possessed a special analytical ability. In their view, that power was what gave him the confidence to win even in pure chaos. As soon as the stage ended, all participants were gathered in the central hall. Chang glanced at his phone. Fans were losing their minds, clips of his wipe spreading across the net. From the outside, it looked like genius-level showmanship. But Chang knew it was just calculation and experience. For him, scenarios like this were old territory. He was simply correcting past errors. The system notified him that his abilities had grown due to the intense load. The prince stared at his friend in awe, even fantasizing about touching that so-called magic pistol. He couldn't grasp how someone could shoot that accurately in a room filled with dust and chaos. Chang gave a short answer. Instinct. But that didn't satisfy the blonde, who wanted more. The judges stepped onto the arena to announce the official results. The head judge emphasized that the show sought the strongest, sharpest, and most dynamic players. She added that every participant still had room to grow and prove their worth. Those who passed were congratulated and officially welcomed as future hunters. The judges noted that in such a short time, several outstanding participants had already stood out. But ahead awaited the final trial. Decisive and the most brutal yet. For it, teams of 7 needed to be formed by the end of the day. Additionally, a special guest would attend the finale, a detail that particularly caught Chang's attention. After the announcement, the participants moved to the main hall, where aggressive recruitment immediately began. Representatives from different teams rushed toward Chang with offers. Managers pushed and argued like it was an auction for the next Messi, while Chang calmly observed the chaos. To streamline things, he suggested all managers gather in one place so he could hear them one by one. Once assembled, Chang sat down like a king on a throne, ready to decide who was worthy of joining his squad. What mattered to Chang wasn't flashy speeches, but concrete terms of cooperation the academies were ready to offer. The first to introduce himself was Shin Woo-cheol, coach of the Seoul Academy national team, confident and charismatic. He painted a long, colorful picture of his academy's glory, stacking up titles and medals while persistently urging Chang to choose them. The flood of flattery and vague praise bored Chang fast, and he dryly asked for the real deal, unique advantages, not empty hype. Caught off guard for a second, the man in the white shirt offered a substantial financial bonus for signing. Another coach immediately jumped in, raising the stakes and adding a steady monthly salary. When the figure of 300 million for signing was mentioned, Chang's interest flickered. That was serious money. But deep down, he knew comfort and control over the roster meant far more to him than cash. He could even walk away entirely. The fact that everyone wanted him gave him rare leverage. The room turned into a full-on auction, grown men cutting each other off with bigger and bigger offers. Fed up with the noise, Chang suddenly declared that he would personally form the lineup of his future team, fully aware that this demand would scare many off. The coaches froze in silence, as if someone had hit pause, waiting to see who dared respond. By the end, some promised to consult their directors and return with revised proposals. Chang reflected. For other rookies, such attention would be an honor. But for him, it was just a tool. Lifting his eyes, he noticed a man who had quietly sat aside the entire time, refusing to join the bidding war. The man handed over a simple business card. He was a coach from a mid-tier team. Chang studied the card, puzzled at how such a modest academy could interest him. The bespectacled coach admitted they couldn't offer massive money, but were willing to grant Chang full freedom in building the roster. That struck deep. Control over the squad meant more to Chang than any one-time bonus. The coach added that several players' contracts were expiring soon, and they needed a leader capable of pushing them forward. Chang bluntly pointed out that his lineup might consist mostly of rookies, a risk not every academy would accept. The nervous coach trembled like a puppy, assuring him the director was personally invested and ready to compromise. He asked Chang to seriously consider the offer and contact them after the finals. Alone at the long negotiation table, Chang realized he stood before the most crucial choice of his new life. He had to decide what mattered more, money and status or freedom. Top academies guaranteed high income, while a third-tier team offered the chance to build everything by his own rules. Stepping out of the hall, he immediately ran into the anxious blonde, who bombarded him with questions. The prince declared right away that he wasn't interested in other offers. He would stay at Seoul Academy, but he was dying to know what decision Chang would make. Calmly, Chang mentioned that some academies had promised multi-million bonuses and lucrative terms. Yet when directly asked, he gave no clear answer about which side he favored. He only said that the ability to choose his own players was what truly mattered. The blonde smirked and reminded him they were still too young for their opinions to carry real weight. Those words made Chang think he needed to grow so strong that he dictated the terms. Then any academy would accept his demands without hesitation. Irritated, he added that he didn't need fancy workshops. His skills were already top tier. He couldn't understand how anyone could obsess over swords and pistols when the world of weapons was so much broader. Still, they headed to the armory, where a welcoming girl awaited them, looking almost angelic. For a moment, the guys were caught off guard by her calm confidence and beauty. She began demonstrating various weapons at an unhurried pace, explaining each one's features. The selection was so vast it was overwhelming, especially for the prince. He bounced between displays like a golden retriever in a room full of new toys. The girl gently offered to help them choose and explain practical applications. Chang felt slightly embarrassed by his friend's behavior. A warrior should keep composure. Following her, they listened to explanations about different inventions and their intended use. She emphasized that equipment must match both fighting style and mission objective. Her breakdown of functions, stats, and nuances felt like a mini lecture delivered with grace. When she mentioned the latest mana-enhanced gear, Chang interrupted, noting they needed something accessible and ready to deploy. There was no time to commission exclusive equipment. The finals were right around the corner. The girl then presented an intriguing item, a defensive stone that activated automatically under attack and could save its owner's life. The blonde stared at the defensive stone like someone had just shown him magic that wasn't in the textbooks, genuinely baffled how he had never noticed devices like this on other players before. The girl calmly explained that the stone wasn't for rookies. Once it breaks, recovery takes serious time, and in real combat, that delay can cost a life. Chang lightly scolded his teammate, pointing out that he barely understood mana devices and kept limiting himself to basic techniques. The blonde flared up, defending himself, claiming he relied on tactics and skill, not on flashy gadgets that could betray him at the worst moment. Tired of the argument, Chang got serious. A real fighter uses everything that boosts his win rate, even if it demands extra training. To prove his point, he launched a mini quiz, asking what type of fighter an explosive mana device would best suit. The blonde actually thought it through, cycling options in his head, trying not to look clueless. He suggested ranged fighters could attach it to a bow, amplifying shots and adding an explosive impact effect. Chang immediately shut that down. Extra weight meant reduced mobility, and in high-speed combat, that was a death sentence. But a second later, even he paused. Tweak the form factor, and the device could adapt to multiple styles, even unconventional combos. While the blonde browsed display cases, Chang mentally simulated builds where explosions controlled spacing and tempo. Out of nowhere, he stepped in and feinted an attack, testing reaction time and imagining how the device could force a shift into close quarters. Satisfied, Chang added that tools like that drained massive mana. Not everyone could handle the load. The prince needed simple, reliable gear that enhanced his style, not something that would burn him out from the inside. Chang personally opted for an upgraded aerial dash, but the blonde kept begging for help choosing something worthwhile. After a moment of thought, Chang spotted a compact attribute that would sync perfectly with his teammates' abilities. It looked like a small whistle, subtle, low-key, but capable of releasing a sonic pulse that disoriented opponents for a split second. The prince frowned at first, skeptical, but once he understood that a single split second could decide a fight, his doubts faded. Leaving the armory, the two headed for the arena, where the judges were already waiting with a new announcement. The cute judge announced that the final would take place in 6 days, time that had to be used at max efficiency. The judges revealed the map of the upcoming battlefield and began assigning participants to teams. The location was a massive forest surrounded by mountain ranges, dubbed the Field of Gods for its scale and brutality. Chang was satisfied. He had fought in similar terrain in his past life and knew where traps usually lurked. Based on previous stages, players were split into blue and red factions. Chang landed in a strong squad. Past tensions aside, everyone now understood the value of cooperation. A judge added that a neutral monster would intervene during the final, disrupting the balance of power. And that monster would be none other than the association head himself, Lee Gyun-taek. The silver-haired master gave brief instructions, declaring he would show the rookies the level of a first-generation hunter. The players were granted a week of preparation. Nerves ran high, but Chang remained ice-cold. Still, the chairman's participation put him on alert, and he decided to clarify things personally. Chang intercepted the director and returned the business card from that so-called mediocre team. The man feigned surprise, claiming he only knew the team sat near the bottom of the rankings. But Chang remembered the future. Years from now, Lee Gyun-taek would become its true owner. Without holding back, Chang called it out, creating instant tension. The chairman tried to deny it, mentioning a proxy owner and accusing Chang of jumping to conclusions. Calm as ever, Chang replied that lying to him was pointless. He saw hidden motives as clearly as a bullet's trajectory mid-flight. For a split second, tension flashed across the chairman's face, as if the words had hit too accurately. But he quickly regained composure, smirking as he acknowledged the boy's sharp perception. In the end, Lee Gyun-taek admitted his connection to the team and confessed he had tried to lure Chang through subtle maneuvering. Yet Chang would only join under one condition: full control over the roster and long-term development strategy. After the conversation, the chairman approached the manager to discuss the unexpected demand. The manager was stunned, unsure whether dealing with such a bold rookie was worth the risk. The chairman admitted that asking for partial management rights was audacious, even for a gifted sniper. But Chang added one more condition that made them seriously reconsider. He promised to win the final, claim every trophy, and prove his leadership would elevate the team to new heights. The chairman smirked, noting that Chang spoke as if victory, even over him, was already certain. The manager burned with indignation, viewing it as crossing every possible line. Yet the chairman stayed calm and conceited. If the boy won, his demands would be justified. The manager insisted the chairman could defeat him at half strength. And then Lee Gyun-taek quietly added that Chang had declared that in 1 week, he would decide whether to accept the chairman into his own team. The chairman didn't look away. Retreat wasn't in his playbook. If anything, his interest in the bold brat only intensified. After a few short exchanges, strong players were already gathering around Chang, and no one questioned his leadership. Chang expected something concrete from Han Gyul: initiative, analysis, a counterplan. Instead, Han Gyul studied him in silence like he was trying to decode the mind of an overconfident war tactician. Chang didn't stall. He moved straight to strategy, fully aware that the key pillars of the squad were himself and Han Gyul. The entire architecture of the final hinged on two stats: Chang's mobility and Han Gyul's control. With an unreadable calm, Chang broke the plan into phases, as if he had already cleared the final dozens of times inside his head. The only serious variable was Chairman Lee Gyun-taek, a factor no one could afford to ignore or underestimate. Chang proposed that from the opening seconds, most of the team would farm monsters, stack resources, and level up. Meanwhile, he and two chosen players would immediately hunt the neutral monster, the chairman himself. Some of the team froze on the spot. The idea sounded insane, willingly chasing a first-generation hunter. The guy with the shaved temple couldn't hold back and asked how 3 of them were supposed to defeat someone like that, even if he was holding back. Without changing his tone, Chang replied that age didn't equal invincibility and that the old man was still human. Another teammate took the chance to jab at him, hinting that overconfidence had a price tag. Chang caught the doubt in their voices but didn't argue. Words wouldn't win this. Then, unexpectedly, Han Gyul stepped in. Calm as ever, he stated that geniuses rarely seem reasonable until their plan actually works. Chang knew many saw his idea as reckless, but if they didn't try, the final was already lost. Before the match began, a pre-game broadcast aired, and the judges appeared to formally restate the rules. 3 phases were announced. First, farming, gathering resources, leveling. Second, a mission. Third, full team confrontation. In Phase 2, teams would have to capture the territory of the neutral monster, in this case, the chairman. The final phase would be a 7 versus 7 showdown with total elimination for the losing side. The real twist was unpredictability. The neutral monster could intervene at any moment. The judges specifically clarified Lee Gyun-taek's role in the arena. As a first-generation hunter, he outclassed everyone in experience, technique, and combat IQ. That was why his parameters were artificially reduced by several levels. Even with restrictions, his edge was obvious. Without flawless teamwork, surviving him was impossible. Theoretically, up to 14 players could clash against him at once, a spectacle bound to be legendary. After the broadcast, the judges debated the situation, and even Ju A-ra, once critical of Chang, admitted his plan might actually work. Still, everyone understood the chairman hadn't taken the hidden monster role by accident. He intended to personally evaluate the future leader. Most thoughts circled back to Chang. Could his ranged style truly counter a close combat fighter of that caliber? Lee Gyun-taek was known for devastating strikes and absolute control over distance. But restrictions created windows of opportunity, and legends were born in narrow gaps like that. In the end, the judges stopped speculating and decided to let the final speak for itself. In the live chat, viewers obsessed over one thing: the chairman entering the game himself. And then the day arrived. The final, where talk would end and only results would remain. Chang's team stood at the center of the arena, tense but locked in. A judge announced the battlefield, the field of gods, and declared the match would end only when one team was completely wiped out. Long ago, when the world first encountered towers, they had appeared chaotically across the globe. Inside those towers were rare artifacts and resources capable of shifting the global balance of power. Nations clashed over them. No one wanted to share that advantage. Hunters began fighting not only monsters but each other. That chaos gave birth to the Hunter League, and modern arenas became replicas of ancient towers. That was why first-generation fighters like the chairman navigated these structures so easily. They had seen them dozens of times before. The judges announced the teleportation to the final arena. The game was beginning. A blinding flash swallowed the field for a second, but Chang had already switched into battle mode mentally. Han Gyul caught up to him and gave a short confirmation of their opening strategy. Like a true commander, Chang signaled his squad. The hunt for the chairman started immediately. The broadcast cut between teams, some farming monsters, others securing high ground. Yu Hyeju was the first to start clearing territory, stacking points through precise kills and rapid scaling. Even with the system artificially nerfing his stats, the chairman still stood head and shoulders above most participants, and the trio charged at him without hesitation. The other teams watched the reckless maneuver cautiously, fully aware that these three were about to challenge the most dangerous player on the field. Armed and pushing his aerial dash to max velocity, Chang tore through the sky. For him, this wasn't just a fight, it was a personal moral rematch. The chairman stood in the neutral zone like the eye of a storm, patiently waiting for anyone bold enough to step into his range. He came prepared, a massive shield in one hand and a heavy weapon in the other, making it crystal clear he wasn't here for games. Calm as a veteran of countless wars, he looked like a man ready to remind the youth that old school was still lethal. His gaze stayed forward, expecting a frontal clash. But the first strike came from behind as Chang's bullets rained in rapid succession. The man deflected the shots almost lazily, barely looking, like this kind of trick was just warm-up drills. After batting away the first barrage, he smirked and declared he had expected something more impressive. While bullets kept flying from multiple angles, the blonde stormed in close with his blade, applying pressure from the front. The old warrior snorted in irritation. Chaotic pressure tactics clearly weren't impressing him. Deflecting their combined strikes felt effortless. He had trained for decades against far deadlier foes. Then suddenly, a colossal shadow eclipsed the arena lights, and the ground trembled under the awakening of a titan. Long ago, these lands had been home to an entire race of stone guardian giants. For unknown reasons, their civilization had turned to stone in a single instant, leaving behind only silent statues. Preparing for the final, Chang had studied ancient records and learned how to awaken one of these giants. When the prince first heard that plan, a chill ran down his spine. Fighting the chairman was madness enough, but adding titans to the mix was next-level chaos. The trigger was simple: strike specific cracks in the stone, and the giant would awaken as a temporary agent of chaos. Han Gyul, fueled by Chang's confidence, believed the giants would become their ultimate trump card. But everyone understood the risk. Centuries encased in stone might have shattered their sanity, making them unpredictable. The blonde panicked, whispering that the titan might mistake the chairman for the true leader and attack them instead. Chang paused for a second. That scenario could absolutely spiral into disaster. But he had prepared mana devices specifically to redirect a titan's aggression if needed. The chairman realized then that Chang had never intended a straight duel. His real objective had always been the statues. What intrigued him most was how the boy even knew the method of awakening them. The revived giant smashed down on the chairman, forcing him into defense while the younger fighters vanished from sight. He assumed they had cloaked themselves in invisibility mantles, waiting for the titan to soften him up. But he recalled those cloaks had long fallen out of favor. Inefficient and mana-hungry relics. The moment he let his focus slip, a bullet burst from true invisibility. And cunning Chang confirmed the theory. The chairman deflected the shot with his shield, while simultaneously parrying the titan's blow with his heavy weapon. Chang retreated into shadow, calculating the perfect timing for his next strike as the chairman wrestled with the stone beast. The chairman, on the contrary, seemed to relish the chaos, shouting for Chang to step out and show his true level. In the judges' hall, shock rippled. No one had expected the kid to awaken an ancient titan. One judge pieced it together. The blonde had struck the statue's cracks, not the chairman, then cloaked himself to finish the activation. Millions watched the livestream in disbelief. The final had already surpassed every expectation. Hidden in the shadows, Chang knew it was time to escalate, or the chairman would dismantle the giant too quickly. While the chairman shattered stone limbs, Chang fired mana-enhanced rounds at vulnerable points. Lee Guntek, despite his age, moved like lightning, dodging shots and delivering crushing blows to the titan. He transitioned between air and ground effortlessly, as if the system's nerfs were just formalities. Continuing the clash, he mocked the hidden sniper, claiming he expected more than shadow shots. Hong understood conventional tactics wouldn't break him. He had to think bigger. Activating his analysis, he studied the chairman's movements and spotted a potential weak link, the shield itself. If angled perfectly, a ricochet could strike the titan and amplify its aggression. That's exactly what happened. The deflected round triggered a second giant, and now two titans dominated the battlefield. Linking up with his teammates, Chang confirmed whether they remembered Phase 2 of the plan. They were holding at a safe distance, watching as the titans forced the chairman into a brutal duel. Meanwhile, the rest of the squad was methodically farming monsters, stacking levels with precision. Some couldn't grasp the strategy. believing they should join the main fight. But Chang trusted only Jin Sung, appointing him temporary leader of the four. Their mission was simple yet critical. Gather strength attributes, avoid casualties, and do not engage the enemy's 7-man squad until the signal. After clearing a massive wave of monsters and stacking enough strength attributes, the squad spotted enemies approaching and instantly slipped behind giant boulders, avoiding an early clash. The opposing team's commander radiated confidence. In her mind, defeat wasn't even on the table this time. Instead of charging head-on, they stuck to their withdrawal protocol, methodically retreating deeper into the arena. Jin Sung confirmed the enemy unit had locked onto their trail, and his job now was simple: maintain distance and never let the gap close. The air grew heavy with tension. Even allies started doubting whether the plan could survive real battlefield pressure. But he issued a sharp order to move toward the designated point, reminding everyone that improvisation now would wreck everything. The enemy squad chased hard, then abruptly stopped, like they had slammed into an invisible wall. Towering before them stood a reawakened stone giant, its posture screaming pure hostility. An icy chill ran down Haiju's spine. She instantly realized the situation had spiraled out of control. They were standing inside the neutral monsters zone. Boulders rained from above, thunder cracked across the arena, and fear became almost tangible. The shaved-headed fighter turned at the noise, confused. Chang's original plan was to confront the chairman, not unleash Titan-level chaos. When he fully turned, he saw an epic collision. 2 Titans and the chairman tearing the battlefield apart. Over comms, Chang calmly asked him to stall. Just a few minutes were needed to complete preparations. Activating telekinesis, the fighter lifted massive stones into the air, creating interference and buying precious seconds. Chang knew this phase had to end soon. Staying in the shadows too long meant risking exposure. While Kim Sung stalled, the team synchronized and began a silent countdown toward the key maneuver. Each clenched their resolve, mentally locking in, taking positions exactly as rehearsed. In a single instant, invisibility cloaks dropped like capes ripped by the wind. Retreat was no longer an option. They launched forward exactly as planned, knowing there was zero room for error. The enemy team felt the ground shift beneath them. One more second and their strategy could crumble. The girl seized control of her emotions, ordering her squad to hold formation and remember the real battle had just begun. Haiju wasn't just powerful. Her will had been forged over years, and retreat wasn't part of her vocabulary. Chang carried himself like someone who had just won a championship and already felt like a living legend. His bullet cut through the air straight toward the girl's heart. It looked like the final moment had arrived. But with a swift flick of her hand, she activated the protective sphere in her ring, and the shot shattered against an invisible barrier. Pride flashed in her eyes. She believed she could endure any onslaught. Chang had anticipated that move, instantly pulling out an explosive device to flip the tempo. Focusing hard, he converted part of the charge into a mana-amplified bullet and fired directly at her. The recoil tore through his arm, but the trajectory was flawless. The explosion hurled her to the edge of the arena, leaving her gravely wounded. The impact exceeded even Chang's calculations. If she hadn't activated a regeneration artifact before the battle began, it would have ended instantly. Chang coolly logged the success. The explosive ether combo was devastatingly effective, but the wounded opponent refused to fold. Her ambition burned hotter than the pain. One thought echoed in her mind: defeating someone like Chang would elevate her to a new tier. As she tried to close the distance again, another bullet struck her, disbelief igniting in her eyes. Meanwhile, the chairman concluded his clash with the Titans. For him, it had been nothing more than a brutal warm-up. Standing atop shattered stone bodies, lightly wounded yet unshaken, he looked terrifying. There was satisfaction in his gaze. It had been a long time since he fought this fiercely. Remembering the true objective, he turned to locate Chang and finish their duel properly. Chang still moved under invisibility, waiting for the perfect timing for his next move. The chairman's tone carried both praise and mockery, acknowledging the clever plan while emphasizing his superiority. Gathering strength, he hurled his weapon forward, precisely targeting where he knew his opponent stood. Chang barely dodged, hoping the Titan fight had at least drained some of the old warrior's stamina. He shot upward into the air, creating distance for precision attacks. At that moment, his allies surged toward the chairman. Numerical pressure had to matter. Each of them pushed to their limit, recalling every technique they had ever mastered. But the chairman remained unbroken. His experience eclipsed their raw drive. A crushing blow struck the blonde, and he failed to fully absorb the force. The others didn't retreat. They wanted to prove the old generation's era was ending. Yet the chairman, wielding a razor-sharp spear with frightening precision, deflected and struck his attackers as effortlessly as if it were mere training. By now, the chairman had nearly wiped the field clean. His face hardened, his eyes like a cornered beast that feared nothing and showed no mercy. In the end, only two from the red team remained, Chang and Han Gyul, and it was on them to bring the final to its true conclusion. The chairman seemed to enjoy the moment, almost deliberately showcasing the gap in levels to Chang. His gaze said it all. He had seen this before, predicted every move. Nothing here truly surprised him. A smirk crossed his lips as he called out, hoping Chang still had a hidden ace worth showing. Han Gyul charged first in a desperate assault, holding steady on the outside, even if inside he might have just been clinging to hope. The chairman didn't even blink. A light motion deflected the strike, followed by an instant counter. He dashed forward like lightning incarnate. The air cracked, and the ground beneath Chang fractured from the force. The spear pierced through Han Gyul's defense and he fell, leaving Chang alone against the first-generation hunter. His palm went slick with sweat, breath breaking into sharp pulls, lips twitching with that all-too-familiar thrill before a real fight. Face to face with the chairman, Chang raised his pistol, forcing his trembling to steady into focus. He understood perfectly. This wasn't just a veteran. This was a combat machine refined over decades of war. Every step Chang made was read in advance. He felt half a second behind in every movement. With a mocking grin, the chairman declared victory already decided and lunged forward like a mountain goat charging down a cliffside. Steel met flesh. For a split second, it seemed like everything was over. But Chang always kept one final ace. Hidden explosives embedded into the plan from the very beginning. At the moment of impact, they detonated, and an explosion thundered across the arena like a volcano awakening. Absolute silence followed. Spectators, judges, millions behind their screens froze. As the dust settled, a massive crater yawned at the center, two silhouettes standing on opposite edges. The system declared it cold and clear. Blue team eliminated, neutral monster defeated, red team victorious. The judges expected fireworks, but not a finale on this scale. Chang's cunning had paid off again. The plan had been crafted down to the smallest detail before the fight even began. One judge silently labeled him the true monster of the game. Only a genius mind could engineer a strategic draw with the chairman and still secure team victory. Regaining awareness, Chang returned to reality without a smile. No joy, no relief. In his eyes, it wasn't enough. He should have dodged the spear clean and landed a precise counter, not relied on an explosion. Seconds later, teammates rushed to him, overwhelmed with emotion and hype. Chang flatly noted it was too early to celebrate. He had drawn with the chairman, not claimed absolute dominance. Han Gyul seemed ready to argue, but instead gave a strange smile like he knew something deeper. The award ceremony began. Participants lined up by the podium as academy heads and association leaders took their seats. Chang's gaze met the chairman's. In that silent exchange lingered unanswered questions. The beautiful judge in a sharp suit stepped forward, reminding everyone of the hundreds awakened and how each dreamed of becoming a hunter. She emphasized that what they had witnessed was only a game, a mere shadow of real first-generation battles. To be a hunter meant blending talent, character, and the will to go all the way. And yet, among 100 participants, one had risen above the rest. The name rang out loud and clear: Chang Hyun, champion of the final, champion of the final. With outstanding performance and astonishing ability, he had achieved his objective. When the trophy settled into his hands, a strange warmth stirred inside him, something long forgotten. In his past life, he had held hundreds of awards, but this one felt truly personal. His family watched the broadcast. His mother, once opposed to his path, now cried tears of pride. His father stayed composed, yet at every explosive moment he jumped up, shouting through tears that it was his son. Back home, Chang remembered starting from the lowest leagues in his past life. This time, everything would be different. Still, one crucial conversation awaited: the meeting with the chairman. The chairman wanted to know why Chang had come and what he truly sought. Both understood the reason. By their agreement, Chang had fulfilled the condition and come to claim his team. With a sly smile, the chairman reminded him that victory had been secured through strategy and giants, not raw strength. Tired of the implications, Chang was ready to turn away, sensing the debate could drag on. But the chairman's hand stopped him. It had been a test, not a rejection. He stated that true partners trust each other and don't search for hidden traps. Official confirmation followed. The team would move under Chang's leadership, as his skills had genuinely impressed. The last doubts dissolved, and Chang, making the wiser call, extended his hand to the chairman, sealing the beginning of a new chapter. A faint spark of awkward tension flickered between the two men. Neither truly trusted the other, and the stakes were way too high for blind faith. Still, they both acted like this partnership was starting fresh, shelving their doubts for now. At last, Chang returned to something resembling a normal life. Civilian clothes, empty hands, no weapons. From the outside, he looked like an average student, not the finalist of a blood-soaked spectacle. He decided it was time to claim his prize properly and forge a top-tier weapon worthy of a hunter at his level. Of course, life without the prince would be too quiet, and the blonde eagerly insisted on tagging along to upgrade his own arsenal. What Chang didn't expect was that the prince wouldn't be the only surprise companion. One of the show's judges approached them. Lee Min-sok, an influential man dressed impeccably, his gaze sharp and observant. The blonde instantly bombarded him with questions about custom weapons, like a kid unleashed at a hypercar expo. Over the city noise, the judge calmly explained that true weapons were always crafted individually, tailored strictly to their owner. When they reached the massive workshop building, Chang paused for a moment. He hadn't been here in a long time. The colossal structure nearly blocked out the sun and bore the grand title of the finest weapon workshop of the new era. Inside, a cold metallic hall greeted them, walls lined with steel. More laboratory than shop. A receptionist sat at the desk, as if she had been expecting them all along. The judge gave her a short nod of thanks, and the group moved toward the designated section. Chang knew the workshop was divided into 4 sectors, each responsible for a different tier of weapon quality and rarity. They were assigned Section B, a mark of high standards and serious craftsmanship. Inside, masters and professors worked over blueprints, welding sparks flashing through the dimness. The prince had never stepped into a place like this before and realized custom weapons were on a completely different level from mass-produced gear. Placing an order required multiple stages. First, selecting a base model to serve as the foundation. The judge demonstrated the process, lifting a sleek blade with a perfectly balanced hilt. After that, the craftsman refined the weapon, tailoring it to the owner's fighting style and unique abilities. Lee Min-sok decided to showcase an ambitious concept, something bold enough to eclipse other designs. He sketched quickly, lines sharp and deliberate, the design commanding respect. The blade featured 6 protrusions along its edge, each meant to amplify damage and widen wounds on impact. The judge asked the craftswoman if such a design could be executed without compromising durability. After some time, the order was completed. The blade gleamed with cold brilliance, intimidating by sight alone. Even the easily impressed blonde stood stunned at how raw metal had transformed into a true masterpiece. The judge appeared satisfied, noting that the craftsman had perfectly realized his vision. He reminded them that the key was understanding which weapon matched their style and how to unlock its full potential. The choice wasn't easy. Displays overflowed with swords, axes, chains, and countless specialized devices. Chang, however, didn't hesitate. He chose the same weapon type he had wielded in his past life, fully aware of its strengths and flaws. He watched the prince stroke his chin like a sage deciding the fate of the world, not just picking a blade. In the end, Do-jun's hand reached for a rapier, a light weapon built for precise thrusts. Chang was surprised but understood that the true magic would lie in its enhancements and modifications. The prince filled out his order form as if drafting an epic poem. When Chang glimpsed the list of requirements, he went silent for a second. The demands were seriously ambitious. The judge encouraged the prince, praising his unconventional ideas as worthy of a professional. Then attention shifted to Chang. Had he chosen a suitable base? Among the sea of blades and heavy weapons, he found nothing that fully matched his style. Firearms were rarely used among hunters, so none were displayed in the workshop. But with his transformation ability, Chang could reshape any base into what he needed. He selected a compact metal bar, plain, unremarkable, yet practical. The judge nodded approvingly, reminding him that the true power came from infusing the object with his intent. In the next second, the bar in Chang's hands morphed into a massive automatic weapon, almost tank-sized in scale. The weapon looked imposing and deadly, the transformation flawless. His companions were stunned. Only Lee Min-sok remained calm, clearly expecting such a display. Whispers rose behind them as craftsmen discussed how cleanly and effortlessly the transformation had been executed. Chang was used to such reactions, yet the spotlight still made him slightly uncomfortable. Workshops like this existed all over the world. each nation pushing its own tech, competing for elite clients. Reputation meant everything here. One legendary commission could attract dozens more, and everyone wanted to work with the strongest hunters. Unfortunately, in recent years, the Korean branch of the workshop had been losing reputation fast. Orders flowing overseas, clients choosing Japanese and European craftsmen, trust dropping season after season. But when the masters looked at Chong, they couldn't help but hope he might be the one to restore the branch's lost name and prestige. The head of the weapons department studied him with the cold curiosity of a predator. He had just won the final and casually pulled off an insane weapon transformation. A chance like this was not something an ambitious woman would let slip. In her mind, a plan was already assembling piece by piece. She introduced herself as Park Hyun-ah, head of the Korean branch, and stated she had something truly special to offer Chang. Narrowing his eyes slightly, Chang replied that technically this was just his prize, and his options were not that wide. Calm and composed, she countered that if he needed something beyond ordinary to craft a perfect weapon, she possessed an option offered to no one else. From her briefcase, she carefully revealed a sky-blue mana ingot. The metal glowing from within like the sky itself was trapped inside. Her gaze locked onto Chang's reaction, measuring just how deeply the sight struck him. The offer was simple. To use the ingot, Chang would sign a long-term rental and cooperation contract. In return, the branch wanted him to showcase their weapons in tournaments and participate in developing new prototypes. The deal was tempting, but one question lingered in Chang's mind. What would they say if they learned he could forge weapons on his own without their help? The air thickened with silence. Chang showed no rush to agree, and for the first time she seemed slightly unsettled. Quickly regaining composure, she recalculated the benefits. With Chang, the branch could convince the market their mana was of superior quality. If he used their material, his weapon would become a living showcase of their technology. That would allow them to launch an entire premium line and reclaim leader status. Maintaining a gentle smile, Park Hyun-ah proposed signing a non-disclosure agreement first. Chang smiled wide and unexpectedly suggested heading straight to the main branch to present everything personally to upper management. The boldness erased her sweet facade instantly. She asked bluntly what he was aiming for. Calm as ever, Chang laid it out. He required full sponsorship because standard weapons weren't enough for him. And the sponsorship was not for luxury. He needed financial backing for his team. Soon, he planned to lead a struggling squad and drag them from the bottom of the rankings. Irritation flickered in her eyes. This guy was not just ambitious. He was straight-up audacious. She questioned why the branch should invest in a team that failed season after season. Keeping her tone measured, she carefully suggested he choose a more promising roster. Chang almost chuckled like a troll in the comments section, because he had already committed to the most problematic team out of pure principle. The branch director tried to explain their goal was to restore reputation, not gamble it away further. Chang answered evenly. He would cooperate exclusively with the Korean branch and promote only their developments. Holding back her emotions, she promised to discuss the terms with the main director and contact him soon. The deal felt inevitable. Both sides understood they would benefit. Only approval from above remained. Sometime later, Chang found himself at a stadium with nearly empty stands. Just a handful of spectators lazily watching the match. That was the typical crowd for a third division league. No hype, no major broadcasts. Two teams fought on the field, and Chang already knew it was his job to elevate one of them. He understood the past seasons had been brutal for these players, but without serious work they would never become champions. Chang knew top leagues held championships in real dungeons with real risks. Lower divisions settled for virtual simulations, where death meant only defeat. Yet even without real danger, players panicked and made foolish mistakes. Watching their chaotic gameplay was painful. No synergy, no clear strategy. He realized the task ahead was massive. This team had never secured a full, legitimate victory. The weight of that realization sent a cold ripple down his spine. The choice he made was truly risky. He glanced at the ranking board and briefly wondered if he should have chosen a safer path. But Chang was not the type to back down. He was determined to turn these underdogs into future champions. His first upgrade instinct was simple. If only there were a convenient interface, he would have smashed the delete roster button. Hoping to find at least one worthy player, Chang headed toward the team's residence. What greeted him was disappointing. Instead of a modern complex, it was an ordinary mid-sized house. He remembered starting the same way once, in a tiny room without sponsors or support. Approaching the door, he entered the access code he had received earlier. The door opened smoothly, and shouting arguments hit his ears instantly. Players loudly blamed one another for losses, shifting responsibility left and right. Chang understood at once. A toxic atmosphere like this was a guaranteed path to defeat on any arena. The coach hurriedly grabbed Chang by the shoulder and, trying to drown out the locker room chaos, loudly introduced him as the new leader. Several players instantly bristled at the newcomer. Tension was already thick, and outsiders weren't exactly welcome here. Without wiping the smile off his face, Chang calmly stated their last game was straight-up trash, and half the roster was dead weight on the field. One guy's face twisted with rage. He was boiling, ready to throw hands on the spot. Clenching his fists, he marched toward Chang, intent on forcing an apology right there and then. Chang just smirked at the cheap bravado and Pridlojal settled it in a fair duel. The terms were brutal. If Chang won, the guy left the team. If he lost, Chang would walk away himself. He kept pouring fuel on the fire, fully aware that at their level, provocation was the fastest way to expose weakness. They moved to the training hall, where the tension felt almost tangible. 3 of the loudest and toughest players took the bait, swearing they would leave too if they lost. Chang stayed calm. He already saw the endgame. Purge the roster of anyone dragging it down. One pitbull-looking dude hissed that he would rip Chang's legs off for running his mouth. Activating analysis, Chang quickly assessed them. Raw potential existed, but discipline and control were missing. Their real issue wasn't lack of power. It was zero understanding of their own abilities. For spectacle and safety, they chose to fight in virtual reality, where limits didn't apply. Chang read them like an open book. Every step, every twitch was predictable. The first opponent charged in without a plan and instantly ate a clean combo of precise strikes. Chang moved casually, almost disappointed. How had players like this even made the league? Yet seconds later, the opponent surprised him with a shockwave ability that shattered ground and structures. The blast forced Chang airborne to avoid collapse, but he mentally noted the skill's potential. The problem was control. The guy burned energy wildly, unable to handle his own destructive force. He tried to end it fast with a brute force assault, desperate to put Chang in his place. But the entire fight unfolded exactly as Chang planned. He guided the opponent where he needed him. When 2 of his buddies tried to interfere, they saw their friend bound in mana and suspended midair. Chang warned coldly that any sudden move would end painfully for them. They rushed anyway. A second later, they were lying in the real world, kicked out of the simulation. Chang reminded them of the terms and declared without hesitation that they were cut from the roster. Stunned and humiliated, the guys froze, unable to believe they had been dropped so easily. The third participant appeared later, angry on the surface, but anxiety flickered in his eyes. When Chang reached for his shoulder to escort him out, the guy clenched his teeth and forced out an apology. Chang knew how heavy those words were for him and asked him to repeat them. Gathering himself, he admitted his mistake again and promised to improve. Chang noted the resilience. More than the others had shown, but still not enough. Lowering his gaze, the player added that his ability wasn't fully unlocked yet, and he would show his true level in time. Chang remembered the skill. The potential was real, but the execution was sloppy. He stated that only those who can listen can be taught, and in frustration the guy swore absolute obedience. He pledged to follow Chang's lead and grind as long as necessary. A minute later, calmer, he admitted the roster was weak and needed serious rebuilding. After a long day, Chang counted the numbers. 5 remained out of 7, meaning 2 more were urgently needed. He messaged Hyo-ju, but the expected rejection came. Their past conflict still lingered. Almost immediately, a message arrived from Han Gyul with a simple line. He wanted in on Chang's team. Chang was both surprised and pleased. A near pro-level player volunteering was huge. Securing Han Gyul would be a massive boost and a serious step towards strengthening the roster. But then another strange message arrived, instantly pulling his focus elsewhere. That same day, Chang began systematic preparation with the updated squad. He studied tactical material, analyzed formations, and distributed roles based on each ability. Reality hit hard. The current level barely met the league's minimum standards. One girl on the team could sense dangerous zones instinctively and drift towards safe positions, and Chang wrestled with how to turn that into a weapon. He concluded that with the right strategy, her skill could become key for defense and map control. Chang understood clearly. Assemble a smart roster, run brutal preparation, and this team would rise to the next tier fast. The next day, Chang met with Chairman Lee to lock in the team's future and finalize the power structure. Lee couldn't resist a little sarcasm, asking with a faint smirk how the new director liked his magnificent roster. Chang narrowed his eyes and dryly replied that he had never seen such an amazing lineup in his life. They sat across from each other like old rivals pretending to be allies. Lee excusing himself by claiming he never had time to dig into third division business. Still, he gave Chang credit for chasing sponsorships, a move that might have saved the team from total collapse. Contracts hit the table. Lee flipped through them slowly, clarifying clauses about rights and obligations, while Chang silently scanned every single line. Between the lines, the chairman asked how Chang planned to reach the superfinal. One obvious route was building everything around Chang as the core piece, but both understood that approach would become predictable sooner or later. Chang had another blueprint in mind, codename Demolisher Strategy, but he kept the details under wraps. Lee shook his head, not fully grasping the scale of the vision, and ultimately stated he trusted Chang and expected results. Formalities concluded, Lee handed over the documents. From that moment, the team officially fell under Chang's command. Taking the papers, Chang exhaled and noted he had no intention of sitting idle. Real work started now. As he reached the door, the chairman reminded him of the upcoming major press conference before the division launch. As both executive director and active player, Chang was required to attend and publicly declare his intentions. He agreed without hesitation, adding that he planned to make the conference interesting. Soon the hall filled with league officials, investors, and journalists, the air heavy with business tension. Chang, however, was visibly bored, waiting his turn while mentally mapping future training sessions. When his moment arrived, the league officially announced that the young hunter would serve not only as player, but as executive president. The crowd's attention remained scattered. His team was labeled underdog, and reporters focused mostly on top-tier clubs. One well-known director confirmed rumors of promotions to the highest division and roster upgrades. He promised to unveil new hunters who could become next season's stars. Chang listened with mild concern, wondering which rookies were being referenced. The man's face looked familiar, but Chang couldn't immediately place him. Then it clicked. Director Lee. In his past life, that man coached a first division team. Now he stood in the third. The next question targeted the head coach of a strong club. Would they sign a promising newcomer? The coach paled slightly and dodged the question, saying nothing was confirmed. That was the very team Chang once intended to join before deciding to lead his current squad. After prolonged questioning, journalists finally turned their focus to Chang. The hall buzzed in disbelief. How had someone so young not only joined but secured a leadership role? Calm and steady, Chang declared the team would undergo radical change and everyone should brace for surprises. The studio stirred instantly, hungry for specifics. What exactly would change? Chang revealed part of the blueprint: a new roster, intensified training, and a fully rebuilt coordination system. He was about to announce an upcoming sponsor and strategic overhaul. The host Ken cut him off as casually as skipping an ad after 5 seconds. Chang firmly reminded him he wasn't finished and demanded the mic back, clearly catching Ken off guard. Once the microphone returned, Chang stated he had studied the league thoroughly and saw not a single truly strong team. A wave of offended murmurs rolled through the hall. That level of boldness was rarely spoken aloud. He added that everyone would need to adapt, because change was inevitable. It was a direct challenge to the entire league, hinting their era might end sooner than they expected. Watching the furious faces of coaches, Chang understood. This was the reaction he wanted. Noise meant momentum. The following day marked the team's first official gathering, and Chang waited at the residence. A knock echoed. Familiar faces entered, the same fighters who had battled beside and against him before. They looked slightly stunned. Instead of a luxury base, they were greeted by an ordinary house. Chang remained focused, satisfied that battle-tested players had chosen to follow him. They glanced around, unsure how a proper training system could be built here. Each had signed specifically because of Chang, believing he could elevate the squad. Chang stated confidently that he would never have called them without a concrete plan. This time victory was not a dream, but a target. By merging their abilities and enforcing discipline, he promised to push the team into title contention. Meanwhile, in the office of Team ESP, the mood was different. Their manager closely monitored the news. Concern tightened his expression. If Chang delivered on his words, competition in the division would become brutally intense. The manager's thoughts were abruptly cut off by a notification on his phone. He frowned, unsure what kind of strange offer could pop up at a time like this. On the screen flashed an invitation from Team PER, whose director was listed as Chang. A proposal for a joint scrimmage that felt unexpected and borderline audacious. Worry and doubt crossed his face, but a second later he decided that solid practice never hurt anyone. He immediately contacted the coach and gave the green light. His squad couldn't afford to lose face against underdogs. The sparring date was set fast, and both teams headed to the arena, puzzled why they should showcase their skills to a group everyone labeled as losers. Chang walked beside his team's coach, who kept complaining that the players barely knew each other and lacked synergy. Chang answered sharp and cold. Without grinding together in a real combat, they stood zero chance of winning. The coach nodded awkwardly, recalling last season's humiliating losses. Dead last in the rankings and constant defeats had dragged the team into deep apathy. Chang promised to do everything possible to teach them how to win, even with slim odds. He added that his experience and cold calculation would pull them out of the swamp, if they were ready to work. With predator-level confidence, Chang approached the rival managers and directors to exchange formal greetings. The opposing coach mockingly remarked he couldn't tell whether Chang was a player, a coach, or a director all at once. Chang absorbed the irony without flinching. He knew exactly why he was here. As they shook hands, he instantly sensed the rivals' true intent. They didn't take him seriously. Their eyes carried arrogance and faint contempt for a third-division roster. Ignoring it, Chang returned to his players who looked tense and slightly shaken before the fight. He declared he would lead them, but they had to execute every command without hesitation. It was time to explain the strategy and demonstrate how to truly face stronger opponents. Approaching Gilhan, Chang ordered him to hold the line at any cost and never lose position. To Yeonju, he instructed her to stay close and remain within his sight at all times. The blonde impatiently asked when he would finally be allowed to engage. Chang assigned him a special role: protect Chang himself and prevent anyone from breaching the core of the strategy. The match began in a dense forest with mountain slopes, both teams advancing toward collision. The battle erupted on a narrow imperial bridge, 7 versus 7, no room for mistakes. It was a stress test. Which team would endure the pressure without breaking first? The rival manager studied Chang's team's gear closely and was surprised by its quality. Still, he felt confident. The newcomers hadn't had enough time for real training. Observers whispered, wondering if this young guy was truly orchestrating everything. The first assault crashed onto the bridge, forcing Chang to shoot upward to dodge a heavy strike. The rival manager grinned, assuming Chang had lost focus. The opposing team moved with precision and aggression, knowing exactly when and where to strike. Both captains rose into the air, clashing in a fierce duel. Sparks burst, bodies were flung aside like confetti in a war festival. But soon the rivals noticed Chang's moves were far too deliberate to be random. The first phase ended with a sharp maneuver that threw the enemy off balance. The strategy was unlike standard playbooks. It had been engineered by Chang down to the smallest detail. Sensing danger, the opponents hurried behind shields, bracing for the next impact. Even those shields couldn't withstand Chang's mana-charged rounds. Barriers shattered under the pressure. An explosion roared across the bridge, blasting enemies in every direction. Precise calculation and synchronized execution earned Chang's team their first decisive victory. The rival managers stood stunned, unable to believe the underdog squad had outplayed them. Thick smoke swallowed the bridge after the blast, hiding fallen players. Moments later, Chang's team emerged from the haze, intact and composed. They exchanged glances. No one expected it to go that clean. Inside the squad, excitement surged. This wasn't just a win, it was proof of potential. After the session, one player approached Chang and asked how he had guided them so precisely. Chang smirked and countered with a question. What mattered most in strategy? Hearing the answer, Chang shook his head and explained there were two paths: overwhelm with brute force or dismantle the enemy structure from within. Deep down, he knew the truth was simple, yet astonishing how rarely anyone truly thought about it. No one could understand why the division had barely used slick aerial maneuvers and bombs before, as if everyone had been stuck playing by the same boring template. Chang knew the real key was tight coordination, relentless training, and a director who always thought one move ahead. It turned out the team had almost no structured practice before his arrival, and one player bluntly asked what strategy Chang planned to follow next. The guy had tasted victory and wanted to spam the same formula again and again. Chang explained that with new blood and discipline, the team would genuinely level up, and the third division would stop looking like an unbreakable wall. The players dreamed of climbing higher as fast as possible and never seeing the bottom of the standings again. After some time, Chang gathered the core roster to break down the future strategy in detail. Some still underestimated opponents, treating them like just more names on a list. Others saw serious threats everywhere and were already nervous before the next match even started. Chang's old acquaintances eyed the idea of reusing similar tactics with open doubt. Chang understood that without real growth, some of them would eventually leave for better offers. They would chase higher salaries and louder promises of future titles. Bringing the focus back, Chang stressed that training drills existed to forge new, unpredictable strategies. One rookie muttered that they lacked fighters strong enough to experiment like that. Under Chang's heavy stare, he swallowed his words and shut up fast. Everything shifted when Chang revealed the monobomb, and the opponents' faces looked like someone had dropped a cursed update on their system. Chang decided the team would become specialists in explosive devices and unconventional battlefield pyrotechnics. A couple of days later, he approached Han Gyul with a request to master controlling multiple swords at once. Chang couldn't grasp the fear on his teammate's face because from the outside the task looked doable. Han explained that handling several blades would cost him precision and strike power. Chang agreed there was risk since focus would be split between weapons. But he had already mapped out a solution, complex yet potentially devastating if executed right. He remembered that in his past life, Han controlled more than 7 swords at high level. Chang decided to personally oversee his growth and rebuild that control step by step. To secure agreement, he subtly pressed on Han's sense of responsibility, implying only he could pull this off. Han grew flustered, having joined out of respect for Chang and not wanting to disappoint him. In the end, Han agreed to begin training, knowing he would have faced this challenge sooner or later anyway. What unsettled him was the scale. How many swords were they talking about? Chang smiled calmly and answered with a number that hit like a drumbeat. 7 at once. Han froze, staring into space, realizing that 7 simultaneous blades meant his current level wasn't enough. That very evening, they headed to the stadium to test the limits of his control. Han needed peak concentration to keep the swords airborne and guide them precisely. During a pause, he admitted he considered his abilities mediocre. He asked Chang to reveal the full plan so he could judge whether he could handle it. After a brief thought, Chang chose to trust his partner. He stated directly that he intended to turn Han's swords into carriers for monobombs. The idea was to maintain a constant reserve of explosive power, a hidden ace in every fight. At first, the bombs would be attached to the blades and then maneuvered through Han's telekinesis. Han would need to learn to release them mid-flight with surgical precision. Chang called the concept artillery and considered it a breakthrough for their division. Multiple blades would carry active charges at the same time. And with another teammate's gravity ability, their trajectories could be adjusted even further. The scheme was nearly complete in theory, but everyone had to know their role down to the smallest detail. That was why Li Yo-ju was vital, since her ability to pinpoint enemy positions became the core of the strategy. Chang summoned her to his office and asked her to develop the skill so she could instantly transmit coordinates to the entire team. She was nervous, palms sweating, voice trembling slightly. Chang switched on his calm charisma and gently placed his hand over hers. He told her she was the center of the entire strategy, and without her precision, everything would collapse. Without her data, the bombs would be useless, and the team would stand no chance of victory. Feeling both fear and responsibility, Li nodded and promised to give everything for the team's success. Chang held Li's hands a second too long, and the girl flushed deep red, lowering her eyes in visible embarrassment. He caught himself lingering, quickly let go, and reminded himself that right now only the game and the team mattered. A few days later, Team PER appeared at a major preseason interview, sitting under a storm of cameras and microphones. Chang stayed alert, wondering why the season opener needed so much noise, but decided after his previous bold stunt, it was smarter to tone it down. The first to take the mic was the red-haired Li Yo-ju, whose big glasses, modest posture, and shy smile made her look even more delicate. Suddenly, a self-satisfied man from the audience cut in, clearly feeding off the spotlight. He declared that PER was too young and naive, and that their captain was nothing more than a loud upstart. Chang stepped close without raising his voice and calmly implied that after PER's victory, the critic would be left with nothing but years and a questionable reputation. The man flared up like a provoked predator and looked ready to throw a challenge on the spot. The host slid between them with a polished smile, noting that PER knew how to generate tension before the season even began. The man backed off but tossed a final promise to prove his superiority on the arena. After the interview, Chang immediately shifted focus back to training with Han Gyul, since empty talk meant nothing. While preparing gear, Chang reminded him that strategy existed not out of fear, but to showcase dominance. He was confident that even if they revealed new techniques, very few could replicate them. Experience told him that in the end he would still have to absorb the heaviest blows himself. He stated directly that Han's sword control would be the breakthrough key for the team. Han nodded seriously and promised to push to his absolute limit for the squad. Within minutes, they stood on the stadium field again, preparing to test their limits. By regulation, the lowest-ranked team could choose the arena for the next match. PER selected the city map. Simple at first glance, but perfect for tactical maneuvering. Once inside, Chang connected to the team channel and ordered everyone to begin only after securing positions. The roster was split between key attackers and those tasked with support and survival. Lee Yo-ju took her position and activated her detection. Her ability triggered instantly, tracking enemy movements like a live minimap and calling out precise coordinates. Chang and the main squad advanced along the indicated routes with sharp coordination. Upon reaching the designated street, they waited for full readiness before initiating the strike. The plan was clean. Chang sealed escape routes with gunfire while the rest cleared and secured ground. Today, they tested the combat version of swords fitted with bombs, and the experiment was meant to be spectacular. Chang took high ground while Han launched multiple blades into the air, the swords gliding like feathers but carrying lethal intent. Chang tracked each bomb attached to the blades, ensuring their trajectories aligned with enemy cover points. Charges detached mid-flight and shot through the windows of an abandoned building at brutal speed. Inside, enemy players were braced for defense, tense and ready. Their coach had warned them that the opponent was cunning, and not to underestimate the tactics. Still, he insisted that standard plays would be enough to secure victory. The squad positioned at the windows, preparing a devastating counterattack. Then the ceiling trembled violently, and panic spread through the building. A red-haired player shouted to raise shields upward against falling debris. They activated barriers in confusion, unable to grasp how rookies had breached their defense. The enemy captain assumed Chang had already burned a large chunk of energy and would soon exhaust himself. Stepping to the window, he did not expect to see swords hovering right before him, each armed with explosive charges. The opponents realized telekinesis was in play and attempted to seize control. The captain ordered a counterattack without realizing a hidden mechanism was already unfolding. With every clash of blades, more bombs detached and dropped. Empowered by Chang's mana, the explosions intensified, shockwaves tearing through barriers without mercy. Players were hurled back several meters, their faces twisted in fury and disbelief. From their vantage point, PER watched the enemy shelter crumble into ruins. A few barely escaped, surviving by pure luck. But Chang had anticipated the retreat and sealed off escape paths in advance. Enraged, the opponents shifted to ranged attacks, believing Chang was vulnerable up close. Yet the telekinetically controlled swords of Han Gil kept them locked at distance, turning the match into a flawlessly executed hunt. Team Pierce secured another flawless 7-0, the plan executing with surgical precision and zero mistakes. First Division manager Jin Han Lee watched the match in open surprise, knowing displays like that were rare in the 3rd Division. Exchanging a glance with a colleague, he admitted Chang did not just talk big but backed it up with cold results. The question lingered in his mind why such a promising player had never joined their roster. His colleague reminded him that Chang was firmly rooted in PER and showed no intention of leaving. They recalled offering him one of their best contracts with elite conditions, yet he had still declined. Watching Chang drag a sinking team upward, the manager seriously considered making another attempt to recruit him. PER's players could barely believe what was happening, as another decisive victory felt almost unreal. They wondered if Chang's bold words had truly been prophecy, and if he really could bring them back to relevance. Chang cooled their rising hype instantly, reminding them this was just the opening chapter, not the climax. After the match, an interview named Han Gil as the rightful MVP. The team faced the cameras again, this time energized and confident. The host asked Han what had changed before this match. After all, they had just finished a season without a single win and wore the underdog label like a scar. Han calmly credited everything to following the orders of their cold-blooded captain, Chang. The host pointed out that the bomb strategy had exploded across social media and become the hottest topic online. Han confirmed it was entirely the captain's concept, a leader he deeply respected. Afterward, Chang was surprised Han had talked almost exclusively about him, and the blonde joked that Chang was running a cult. Laughter echoed from behind, someone clearly backing the joke. They turned to see teammates looking at Chang with awkward admiration. Their eyes carried respect, because to them he had already become the symbol of change. The team celebrated, relieved that their streak of losses finally belonged to the past. A few days later, the blonde casually slurped hot noodles while sitting on the floor. He noticed Chang heading out on business, clearly bound for something important. Before leaving, Chang reminded him not to slack even on a day off, since a brutal season lay ahead. The blonde nodded but soon settled in front of the TV, deciding to recharge a bit. Meanwhile, Chang headed to the Hunter League Stadium to watch an international match. Judge Min-sok had personally invited him, almost like an unofficial mentor taking him under wing. They arrived early, and Min-sok confidently assured him that doors would always be open for them. Taking their seats, the judge remarked that Chang looked like he belonged there, as if the stage was already his domain. Min-sok admitted he had worried Chang might decline due to personal plans and thanked him for coming. The match was Korea versus Japan, and Chang noted Japan usually dominated these encounters. He bluntly questioned the point of attending if the outcome felt predetermined. Chang was dissatisfied with Korea's state, citing lack of experience and unstable performance. Min-sok quietly said that one day Chang would step onto such a stage himself and should remember this moment. He added that he had a surprise, being friends with a Japanese national team player and offering to introduce them after the match. Chang realized Min-sok carried serious expectations for him. The match ended quickly, with Korea losing as expected. Min-sok invited Chang down to meet the Japanese player, masking his disappointment with composure. Yet his clenched fist betrayed how deeply the defeat stung him. Soon, a Japanese athlete approached them, confident and sharp-eyed. It was Takumi Minamino, a player of Japan's national team. Min-sok and Minamino embraced warmly like longtime friends. Minamino could not resist a light jab about Korea's loss. Min-sok cut the joke short, asserting his faith in the new generation of hunters. He indicated that this new generation stood right before them as he introduced Chang. He emphasized that Chang had just debuted yet was already considered a rising star. Minamino shook Chang's hand and noted that Min-sok had spoken highly of him. With measured curiosity, the Japanese player suggested a small test, asking Min-sok for approval. Chang paused, weighing whether to accept the challenge right there under the gaze of such a formidable opponent. Chang silently scanned the Japanese fighter's stance, his steps and shoulders, growing still for a split second as if calculating the true cost of a single mistake. Realizing he was facing a genuine elite, Chang chose not to back down, because losing face here was not an option, and he accepted the duel. The Japanese player studied him from under his brow and caught the steel in his eyes, understanding this guy was not about to tremble before titles. They exchanged polite words, yet the air tightened with pressure while Min-sok stood nearby, already regretting introducing them so quickly. In another hall, analysts were dissecting the Korea versus Japan match, and one observer looked visibly irritated. A young man in a mustard shirt tried convincing leadership that the level was rising and the team would soon reach respectability. The senior official ranted like a toxic Call of Duty lobby warrior, throwing labels instead of plans or brains. This hot-tempered critic turned out to be a representative of the International Game Authority, deeply dissatisfied with the state of Korean hunters. When the chief stormed out, the man in the mustard shirt remained drained, tasked with assembling a roster capable of changing everything. He felt time slipping away and hoped his colleagues had already spotted promising talent. After a moment of reflection, he realized the answer might lie lower in the rankings, where hidden gems often waited unnoticed. Han Gyol crossed his mind first, confident and technical with untapped potential still waiting to explode. He also noted the gravity control player, sensing that such synergy could shift the balance of power. And of course he remembered Chang, whose icy composure and unconventional thinking stood out immediately. For a second he imagined them together in the national squad, but logic reminded him they were still too young for that leap. Meanwhile, Chang prepared for the test duel with Takumi, as Min-sok watched with visible concern. He remembered Takumi's youth, ambitious and hungry to display dominance at every chance. Min-sok understood the Japanese ace would not just test Chang, but attempt to assert superiority. Takumi sensed his friend's tension and assured him he would not be overly harsh with the rookie. The duel was set in a parallel reality, and Chang selected a map built from a maze of urban slabs. Takumi paused briefly, recognizing the choice as an attempt to dictate tempo. He doubted nothing about himself, being Japan's finest and among the world's strongest, and had no intention of yielding. Both fighters took rear positions, waiting to strike at optimal proximity. Chang reminded himself that he rarely lost duels, as long as he stayed ice-cold. He rapidly memorized the map. Every corner, portal, and potential escape route burned into his mind. Through a portal, he sensed the opponent's presence nearly opposite him. Without hesitation, Chang fired his rifle, calculating the trajectory through a spatial rift. The bullet emerged from the opposite portal and shot straight toward Takumi's back. The whistle sliced the air as Takumi sensed danger at the last instant and reacted instantly. He accelerated, deflected the bullet, and noted with surprise the precision behind the calculation. The portal shot was not reckless bravado but a calculated move. Takumi understood that one fraction of a second slower, and he would have suffered not just a wound but a blow to his pride far worse than the injury. Watching the outcome, Chang felt genuine surprise because the calculation had been nearly flawless. He assumed tiny spatial fluctuations and energy distortions had altered the trajectory. Takumi shifted to a waiting stance, analyzing how the rookie had pinpointed his location. Internally, he acknowledged that this third division player deserved respect. But the duel had only just begun, and the Japanese ace moved into the active phase. He smashed through walls like a Minecraft griefer who cannot carry and just deletes the server. He deliberately dismantled the maze to force an open, face-to-face confrontation. Walls collapsed one after another, transforming the arena into a clean battlefield for an honest clash. Chang had already crept closer, observing Takumi's actions and calculating the next step. He understood that Takumi counted on superiority in close combat, but Chang Hyun never played by someone else's script and always twisted the plot. Min-sok noticed in surprise that Chang struck first again through temporal tunnels. As he monitored the duel, a Korean national team player approached him. They exchanged greetings with mild awkwardness, having not crossed paths in some time. Min-sok expressed regret over the recent defeat, noting the team had been close to victory. The Korean player glanced at the monitor and spotted Takumi locked in battle with an unknown opponent. He asked who this rival was that could hold the Japanese ace at bay. Min-sok replied that it was a third division rookie, a rising star already catching the attention of the strongest forces. Watching the duel from the sidelines, both Min-sok and the Korean player initially believed Chang had no chance against someone operating on a completely different tier and stage. The Korean finally asked Min-sok why he had not even visited the national team locker room after their defeat. He insisted that Min-sok's mere presence could have boosted morale, shaken them awake, and maybe shifted the outcome. But the judge remained silent without even turning his head, and that silence carried more pain than any spoken answer. The persistent teammate kept pressing, demanding to know why old partners were now met with cold distance. Min-sok cut him off sharply, stating that what was unfolding on the screen mattered more than any lost Korea-Japan match. Both refocused on the monitor and realized the duel was approaching its climax. The Korean player froze in shock, his jaw nearly dropping at what he saw. On the screen, Takumi's bow lay on the ground, separated from its owner as if ripped away by unexpected force. The Japanese fighter stood nearby, his purple hair dusted with debris from shattered slabs. Over him stood Chang, calm and composed, wearing the expression of someone whose calculations were unfolding exactly as planned. The observers did not know how to react because seconds earlier it had seemed like Takumi held full control. They hurriedly replayed the footage to catch the exact moment the entire match flipped. After clearing the maze and opening the arena, Takumi had expected a direct clash to prove his superiority in close combat. When Chang appeared in sight, Takumi unleashed a rapid barrage of energy arrows from his hybrid bow without leaving gaps. Chang remained still until the final fraction of a second, as if the incoming projectiles were harmless fireworks. At the precise moment, he shifted minimally, dodging with energy-efficient movements while studying his opponent's rhythm. Takumi realized his assault had failed, but still believed he controlled the tempo. He chose to destroy the nearest portal to strip Chang of spatial advantage and close off unexpected attack angles. But Chang moved first, the rifle roaring as streams of bullets poured through portals and bent mid-flight. The projectiles emerged from the left, above, and even near the ground, as if the arena itself had turned against Takumi. Takumi understood that if this rhythm continued, infinite evasion was impossible. He activated a defensive shield, intending to buy time and regroup. The barrier began to crack under mana pressure, the impacts heavier and more precise than anticipated. The shield fractured and Takumi panicked like an iPhone without a case in a packed crowd, technically alive but already praying. In that instant, he realized Chang's calculations were running one step ahead of his own strategy. Chang advanced, knowing that defeating such an opponent was not just a point, but a gateway to the world stage. In reality, Min-sok approached Takumi expecting irritation or cold anger. Instead, the Japanese ace smiled, his gaze filled with respect and competitive excitement. He acknowledged Chang as a true monster and admitted that on the global stage this young man could shift the balance of power. Min-sok understood the scale of that potential, yet the thought of Chang facing seasoned world veterans stirred unease. Back home, Chang replayed one critical portal adjustment repeatedly, knowing any miscalculation there would have cost him the duel. He admitted to himself that Takumi's strength was immense, and a single mistake could have meant defeat. His thoughts were shattered by teammates bursting in with loud shouts and a phone in hand. They demanded explanations because news feeds were exploding with headlines about him. On the screen, Takumi openly spoke of his respect for the Korean rising star. Clips of the duel flooded sports channels, highlighting Chang's composure under pressure. Chang calmly clarified that it had only been a training duel, albeit against a world-class player. The team could not believe he spoke so casually about defeating Japan's national representative. Chang understood that in raw physical power many, including Takumi, surpassed him. His true weapon was experience and analytics, forged through years of relentless battles and calculations. With full knowledge of the map and opponent behavior, losing would have been an unforgivable mistake. He listened to their praise without arrogance, maintaining inner distance. Han Gyul's puppy-like gaze shone with admiration again, and Chang caught himself smiling slightly. The blonde passionately declared that if he had been there, he would have unleashed his best tricks and given the Japanese ace no chance. Chang laughed and ruffled his hair lightly, reminding him that a long season awaited and relaxation was not an option. Inside, he knew one wrong calculation or trajectory shift could have rewritten the outcome entirely. Checking his status, he saw his metrics had risen, as the duel demanded immense focus and energy. That sparked almost childlike joy in him while strengthening his resolve to train the team even harder. The very next day, Chang went to the coach to discuss the team's development plan and leverage the surge of attention to their advantage. The coach, who looked like Harry Potter, calmly said the team's battle spirit was high after starting the season with wins and finally tasting confidence. Chang coolly countered that better vibes were nice, but they were still miles away from a real fight. He added there was too much work ahead to sit around smiling at small wins that guaranteed nothing. As the discussion continued, Chang asked whether the coach had backup strategic ideas in case their current plan collapsed. He understood that if he could not elevate the team systematically rather than relying on personal strength alone, it would count as failure, so additional layers were necessary. Chang knew individual growth was critical, because without upgrading each player's abilities, the team would never become stable. That was why he decided to shift training toward ranked duels to expose each player's true ceiling. Gathering several members, he laid out the new training format in detail and explained exactly what he expected. Some questioned why personal rank mattered when they needed to master team combat. Chang clarified that if individual levels stayed average, teamwork would crumble in decisive moments. He warned them to give everything, because after each match, he and the coach would dissect their abilities without mercy. Chang and the coach observed a duel between two players, recognizing both had distinct strengths and potential. A crowd of teammates gathered around the big screen as if it were a tournament final instead of routine practice. The first to step onto the ranked arena was Min-Seon Lee, a mid-range fighter skilled with multiple types of explosives. Her opponent was Kim Han-gil, a future knight in the making with raw power, durability, and aggressive offense. The signal sounded and Kim surged forward like lightning, flaunting speed and physical dominance. Min-Seon reacted instantly, activating preset charges to control the surrounding space. She deployed a delayed bomb, aiming to catch him in a mistake and disrupt his tempo. Yet the knight evaded direct impact and refused to be cornered by her explosive zoning. He launched a counterattack with blue flames igniting the arena, and the victory ultimately went to him. Afterward, Chang and the coach meticulously analyzed each phase and decision of the match. The coach believed Min-Seon had dominated most of it, but Chang disagreed. He pointed out that Kim understood his positioning and deliberately searched for angles to avoid her primary blast radius. In Chang's view, patience and awareness won the duel rather than brute strength. Both performed well, though Min-Seon had skirted dangerously close to defeat multiple times. A girl in a yellow beanie quietly appeared nearby, the same one who had earlier showcased unconventional explosives. She called out to Chang after overhearing his comments about her combat style. Chang calmly introduced himself as a rookie currently in the 3rd division. The girl gave a playful smirk and admitted she had almost been offended, but now saw his remarks differently. Chang did not extend the conversation because Han Gyul's match was about to begin, and that was his priority. On the way back to the screen, he noticed the girl in the yellow beanie following him quietly. He chose to ignore it, knowing hunters often had their quirks. Returning to the screen, Chang saw Yeonju already engaged in battle while maintaining distance. She was strong, but her full potential had yet to unfold. She cycled through attack options but hesitated during critical moments. In the end, she lost the duel, admitting one-on-one formats were still difficult for her. Back in the common hall, she noticed Chang had watched her entire match and grew visibly nervous. She feared he would be disappointed or draw harsh conclusions from her loss. But Chang had no intention of crushing her morale, since his goal was growth, not damage. Reviewing her stats, he highlighted her resilience and sharp reactions under stress. He believed she could become an excellent marksman if she mastered mana control properly. However, her current energy pool prevented her from sustaining consistent attack output. Chang therefore suggested she temporarily focus on a scout and directing role. She took it as a demotion and doubt flickered across her face. Chang gently placed a hand on her shoulder, explaining it was a developmental phase, not a ceiling. He added that she was already a crucial piece of their strategy, and without her, the system would fail. She blushed at his closeness, yet determination began to burn in her eyes. Chang emphasized that stopping training was not an option because growth came only through relentless practice. He explained that serving as a support scout would refine her positioning, after which they would reignite her offensive potential. She still harbored doubts but slowly began to understand that Chang saw a future for her bigger than she imagined herself. In the next heartbeat, Chang sent the girl into the trial cube with a bow in her hands and a full quiver on her back. She had no clue what was happening or why she was locked inside until Chang briefly informed her that her mission was simple and brutal: survive for 5 minutes at any cost. Naturally, Chang observed everything through a monitor, expecting a result worthy of the pressure. Inside, she struggled against rising fear as scorpions slowly surrounded her with clear intent to strike. She stood in a specialized training zone where survival meant defending herself no matter the price. The dungeon she sprinted through twisted like a lethal maze where one wrong turn meant getting erased. Chang gave the order to engage, noting that this environment was perfect for unlocking her hidden potential. After that, he moved on to check other trainees, yet the girl in the yellow beanie silently followed again. She trailed him like a shadow, and Chang simply shrugged it off, knowing hunters were often wired a little differently. Meanwhile, he watched Gilhan's session, and the guy nearly jumped when he noticed Chang standing by the big screen with the coach. Chang calmly reassured him, saying he saw serious potential and there was no need to panic. He emphasized Gilhan's strong physical stats and solid foundations across multiple combat aspects. Chang pointed out that the real issue was timing, because Gilhan often misread the moment to trigger his abilities. In the coming weeks, he would train non-stop, and Chang assigned him to study fighters with similar styles. He demanded detailed breakdowns of every match reviewed to verify genuine progress. Chang and the coach stepped into the common hall, acknowledging that the team's base ratings were already respectable. The blonde asked Chang to craft a special tactic just for him so he could shine in the next fight. After analyzing the situation, Chang concluded the prince needed a fast and razor-sharp rapier to unlock his full potential. Now the only question was how to make that plan reality in the shortest time possible. Turning around, Chang remembered the girl who had been following him all day and wondered where she had suddenly vanished. He recalled that she had performed decently against a heavy opponent before overhearing his critique. Her motive was simple, as she wanted to witness firsthand the guy who had defeated a famous Japanese ace. But all day, Chang had focused only on team drills and had not showcased anything flashy. Watching ordinary training bored her slightly because the players still did not look like true pros. She relaxed, believing no one on Chang's team currently matched her level. On television, an analysis show was dissecting teams and grading their strengths and weaknesses. Team PER received high marks for tactical decisions, clean execution, and unconventional style. Chang and the coach listened closely as analysts noted the squad's steady growth since season start. Yet experts questioned whether they could maintain that peak until the final stretch. Discussion then shifted to the powerhouse team LTD, renowned for discipline, raw strength, and a complete skill set. The coach cautiously remarked that preparing for LTD would require extreme precision. He also asked why Chang forced Yeonju to fight monsters instead of sticking to standard drills. Chang explained that this method was meant to awaken her dormant abilities. He added that she needed greater survivability and mobility to withstand real pressure. It was equally crucial for her to learn forward-thinking and predictive combat awareness. Chang aimed to forge fighters as adaptable as cybernetic soldiers who could recalibrate instantly. Meanwhile, the girl set a trap for a massive stone monster resembling a complex mousetrap. When the creature approached, she activated her gift and attempted to bind its movement. This time, the technique succeeded, freezing the stone giant in place. She had never executed that ability so confidently before and stood in shock. She could not comprehend how energy from her hands could restrain something so colossal. Seeing this breakthrough, Chang felt genuine excitement and realized they had real chances against LTD. Before the next match, the host requested interviews with team managers. The first to respond was a self-assured man in dark glasses who clearly thrived on attention. Without hesitation, he declared victory already secured and dismissed further discussion. He added that a new, intriguing member would soon join their lineup and strengthen the roster. News of a new opponent immediately put Chang on alert. He wanted to be ready for any surprise and planned to analyze future rivals thoroughly. While Chang weighed possible scenarios, the prince quietly approached him. The blonde noticed Chang's grim expression and joked that he must have already spotted a weak link in the enemy ranks. At first, Chang brushed off the prince's words, but then the prince showed him the image of a secret player set to step onto the arena in this very match. Chang's eyes widened as he recognized Ryu Jun on the screen, a man who had once stood beside him on the same team in a past life. Ryu had joined after Chang back then and adapted with terrifying speed, carving out his place almost instantly. His abilities were exceptional, and his mana felt denser and purer than nearly anyone around him. He could single-handedly shatter an enemy formation, flipping the flow of battle like it was nothing. There was no time to dwell on memories as the match began, and both teams were pulled into the virtual battlefield. Chang immediately ordered maximum explosive deployment to eliminate as many opponents as possible at the start. The team cautiously noted that their bomb supply might deplete quickly, leaving them without their primary edge. Chang instructed them to retreat if ammunition ran low, while telling Yanju to hold position and await further commands. The squad gathered at one point, awaiting the captain's precise orders before engaging. Yanju scanned enemy positions and discovered they were converging inside a nearby building. She suggested waiting until they fully grouped up to wipe them out with one devastating strike. Chang rejected the idea, reminding them that strikes were best delivered when enemies were scattered, not clustered. Hangul therefore locked onto individual coordinates to strike before the opponents unified. Seconds later, mind swords burst from a window and flew straight toward the enemy shelter. Several opponents were caught outside while running toward their expected clash point. They never anticipated an aerial assault and were stunned by explosive projectiles raining from the sky. The blasts hit their marks, blue flames lighting the city streets and leaving clouds of dust behind. Chang quickly assessed the damage, confirming 2 enemies eliminated while the rest retreated into a neighboring building. Over comms, the team confirmed they still had enough explosive swords to maintain pressure. Approaching the enemy's building, Chang ordered another wave of bombs and told them to wait for the outcome. He commanded entry only after the dust settled and visibility returned. Chang remembered Ryu's abilities clearly and understood the kind of surprises he could unleash. He intentionally withheld full details from his team, wanting them to witness Ryu's true power firsthand. The swords launched again, and the fighters braced for another thunderous detonation. To their shock, the blades slowed midair as if colliding with an invisible wall. The new player, Ryu Jun, proved unbelievably powerful, capable of unpredictable moves. The explosive swords detonated prematurely in midair, stopped cold by his ability. The prince stared in disbelief as their primary trump card was neutralized. Chang, however, smiled, having long known Ryu possessed monstrous strength. From childhood, Ryu had been extraordinarily powerful, and opposing him was never easy. As a boy, Ryu Jun had lived peacefully with his parents, untouched by fear or pain. One day, monsters invaded his home and brutally took his family. Chairman Lee later recounted how the boy was found barely alive, consumed by terror and rage. The chairman took him in, and the youth swore to annihilate every monster that stole his world. Fury burned in his eyes, ready to tear apart anyone in his path. The chairman saw the makings of a great warrior and devoted years to forging him through relentless training. But by the time Ryu became strong enough, the final dungeon had been cleared and no enemies remained. With no purpose left, he fell into apathy because his life had revolved around a revenge that never came. Eventually, he left the chairman and vanished from sight for years. Now, watching the match, the chairman wondered how fate had once again aligned Ryu with Chang. He was eager to see who would prevail, as both young men were powerful, intelligent, and ice-cold. When the swords exploded mid-air, the prince panicked because aerial assaults were no longer viable. Chang reminded them that numerical advantage still belonged to them with 2 enemies already down. He contacted the fighters in cover and ordered them to regroup for a coordinated assault. Yanju remained separate, like a hidden ace waiting for the perfect moment. The team stormed the building, confident and prepared for close combat. Inside, the space was wide with multiple covers, making the enemy's search time-consuming. Chang kept his rifle ready, knowing in such an environment it could become decisive. They assembled like a low-budget Avengers squad with twice the drama and zero chill. Within seconds, the teams collided at the building's center, stepping out and snapping back into cover like predators, testing who would flinch first. Sparks and explosive flashes ripped through the air as every fighter burned abilities at full throttle without sparing energy. Han Gyul pushed relentlessly, pouring everything into breaking his opponent and dragging victory closer. Seeing their execution, the enemy admitted internally that for a 3rd Division squad, they were performing shockingly well. He tapped into the full spectrum of his magic and focused so intensely, it felt like the world had faded out. A violet beam sliced across the building, sparks raining from the ceiling as the shockwave hurled several fighters aside. His metallic mask hid his face while his eyes glowed red, whether from rage or intimidation was unclear. He scanned the opposition head to toe and recognized genuine strength among them that demanded respect. In theory, their combined abilities could disrupt his energy flow if they acted in perfect sync without panic. So he chose to strike first, refusing to give them even a second to coordinate. He crawled along the ceiling like Spider-Man without the charm. Pure survival mode activated. Han Gyul refused to retreat, ready to prove their squad did not trail in power. The opponent launched upward as crimson fire ribbons spiraled around him like an internal reactor igniting. When he clasped his hands, a devastating blast rolled through the hall, flattening everything in its path. The assault never paused, the newcomer attacking relentlessly and denying his enemies any breath. Pulse after pulse hammered the chamber, each flash followed instantly by another as the floor trembled from recoil. While firing signals in waves, he sought to break their defense and realized they were sturdier than expected. For a moment he considered that even so, they still did not match Chairman Li's level, the man who trained him. He believed their strategy was simple and already decoded, posing no serious threat. The battle stretched on as each fighter locked onto a specific rival. Mastery was on display from both sides, turning the clash into a brutal endurance test. Sword arcs, pistol bursts, and magic flares blended into a chaotic symphony of differing combat levels. The fighter in the green beanie delivered a crushing blow to the blonde, sending him skidding meters back. Watching this, Ryu felt confident victory leaned their way, though he acknowledged the opposition was far from weak. At last, Chang entered the fray seriously, conjuring magical steps in midair that made enemies tense up. He sprinted across the floating steps, shifting angles and striking from above or ground in seamless transitions. Ryu was surprised by Chang's speed, recognizing the maneuver required razor-sharp timing. Stone-faced, Chang opened fire with his rifle, methodically suppressing targets one by one. The masked fighter faltered briefly, but acknowledged the rival's caliber and entertained the thought of an equal clash. The green beanie fighter fought fiercely, fully immersed and blind to anything beyond his target. Racing along the ceiling, Chang locked onto him and fired the instant he sensed distraction. The green beanie, faintly reminiscent of Shredder, stood stunned as most of his team had already fallen. Landing smoothly, Chang checked on his teammate and prepared to maintain pressure. The opponents allowed themselves only seconds to breathe and reassess. It became clear a pair of enemies remained outside, and Chang ordered his squad to eliminate them. He himself prepared to face Ryu alone, where the real duel would ignite. The entire nation watched, sensing that a single misstep could turn fatal. Yet Chang once again displayed composure that left viewers in awe. Chairman Li observed carefully, knowing both youths were immensely talented yet dangerously confident. He wondered if the red-eyed fighter possessed enough composure for a true one-on-one without team support. The outcome was nearly impossible to predict because everything hinged on their decisions. The chairman noted that for the first time in years, he was witnessing a battle of minds rather than brute force. The confrontation was gripping, a duel between two leaders unfolding in real time. As they analyzed each other, Chang recalled the countless trophies he had once held in a previous life. Confidence surged within him, knowing experience and calculation tilted the scales. Deep down, he believed no one born could defeat him under equal conditions. The fight intensified as dust billowed, concrete shattered, and wall fragments scattered across the hall. The red-eyed fighter remained hyper-focused, trying to anticipate Chang's next move. Chang stayed calm, waiting for that single mistake to exploit without hesitation. The red-eyed warrior kept telling himself Chang was dangerous, yet convinced himself he would prevail in the end. He activated his magic and slowly, with razor focus, began tracing blazing circles in the air with his hand. He intended to showcase his devastating strike power to Chang, and genuinely hoped the guy would not handle it. The impact was monstrous, and in a single second the room was torn apart by catastrophic destruction. Chang knew this guy was dangerous, yet time had dulled the edge of old memories. Fearing his shield would not tank another hit like that, Chang chose to move first and strip his enemy of momentum. It was go time as Chang launched upward and started emptying magazine after magazine from his pistols. Without hesitation, the opponent leapt onto an aerial platform to dodge the bullets and buy a few precious seconds. Chang kept firing while his rival weaved through the barrage, the tension spiking as the outcome stayed uncertain. Chang understood that years of training under Chairman Lee meant this fight demanded absolute focus. He knew that while the enemy dodged, he was also charging up for a sudden crushing counterattack. So Chang signaled Yan, who had been patiently waiting for her cue to enter the battle. Her task was to catch Ryu's emotional vibrations and predict his next move before it happened. Chang ordered her to begin tracking immediately, knowing another chance like this might never come. At the same time, he gathered a dense black ribbon of magic around his hands, preparing a decisive strike. Something glitched as his mana ran short before the technique could fully form. The black ribbon shattered mid-cast, Ryu twitched off rhythm for a split second, and Chang instantly surged forward to capitalize before recovery. Refusing to lose face or initiative, he charged at the enemy hovering near the ceiling. Bullet after bullet slammed toward Ryu's body, and in that instant Ryu realized this might be the end. Victory was nearly in Chang's grasp, and Chairman Lee watched in astonishment at the sudden shift. It became clear that Yeon could not only predict movement but also subtly slow the flow of Ryu's mana. Chang realized that with abilities like that, his team had unlocked a real key to future wins. At that very moment, Chairman Lee's phone rang, and the caller was someone who almost never reached out. With slight concern, he answered and asked why he was being called during such a crucial event. The voice asked if he was watching the match, and the chairman confirmed he had been following it closely. The caller requested that Chang be brought over for a visit, as his daughter had taken a liking to both the match and the young fighter. The chairman was genuinely surprised, since this longtime acquaintance had never cared about players from lower divisions. After the match, everyone dispersed, while Han Gyul sat quietly in the locker room typing intensely into his phone. He was jotting down detailed notes about the game and pointing out that Chang had nearly carried the decisive moment alone. A sudden smack to the back of his head hit him like a kid caught writing cringe fanfic in class. Stunned, he could only stare at Chang with wide eyes and no words. Chang knew that silence meant one thing, that the notes would continue the moment he left. As tradition demanded, after every match an MVP was chosen to give an interview. This time the MVP was Chang himself, and he stepped up to the podium ready for anything. The first question was predictable, asking whether the win was truly planned or just a lucky break. Chang remained composed and stated confidently that victory had been scheduled since the season began. The host reminded viewers of the earlier press conference where his bold words had caused a stir. The host then replayed the match's most explosive moment and asked for Chang's comment. On the screen appeared the frame just before Ryu's defeat, with Chang's rifle aimed straight at him. The audience wanted to know if Chang had anticipated the duel or if it unfolded on instinct. He faced a choice between honesty and pouring gasoline on an already blazing narrative. Chang declared that he was always ready for any duel or battle and could never be caught off guard. With a faint smirk, he mentioned his main rival while pretending to forget the name. The referee gently supplied the name Ryu Jajun, trying to smooth over the brewing tension. Chang repeated that he considered his opponent mediocre and easily trapped by superior planning. He emphasized that it was not about the enemy being weak, but about himself being simply too good. Watching the interview, Ryu struggled to contain his fury as his fists trembled. Chang was deliberately playing to the crowd, crafting the exact image he needed. Back in the locker room, the team showered him with praise for both the fight and the fiery interview. Chang only smirked and said he had done nothing special, just executed the plan. Yet what the team really wanted to know was how he managed to bring Ryu down to the ground and seal the duel in the final moment. In a calm, even tone, Chang stated that the final play was not his doing at all and that Yeon had delivered the decisive impact. One of the players pointed out that Yeon had been training separately with Chang, and that instantly sparked some suspicious side-eyes. He genuinely wanted to know how they had unlocked new abilities in such a ridiculously short time. The girl, stammering from nerves, almost said Chang's name and was about to spill the whole story. Chang looked around in confusion, unable to understand why the entire team was staring at him like he had just confessed to something illegal. The squad was low-key shook by what they thought they heard, while Chang found their reaction wildly overblown. The team's imagination ran in the wrong direction entirely, and Chang felt like the only sane person in the room. The next day at the team house, Chang watched an interview the prince was giving, and it felt straight up bizarre. The guy was explaining how the team owed their brilliant results to him and how he had become their central pillar. Chang stared at the screen in disbelief, like he had turned on an interview where the prince was auditioning to be the main character of the MCU. He also noticed the prince flexing a brand new weapon that had clearly just come fresh out of the workshop. Chang wondered when the guy even found time for this interview and why he was talking such nonsense. When asked how the team started winning, the prince claimed that thanks to him and Chang, the squad had finally become one unit. He added that he was leading the team forward while Chang supposedly handled things from the rear, like some shadow support. The absurdity was interrupted by a notification as Chang received a message inviting him to a meeting. It was Chairman Lee, who likely wanted to discuss the team's future development. Chang knew he could only reveal the broad strokes without exposing the finer details of upcoming strategies. That same day, he cleaned up, put on sharp trousers, and headed to meet the chairman. Entering the spacious apartment, he noticed a couple of unfamiliar faces seated at the table with Chairman Lee. Chang politely greeted the chairman before even stepping fully into the room with the strangers. Chairman Lee smiled and remarked that he had begun to wonder if Chang would show up at all. Chang felt slight irritation at the presence of outsiders since he had expected a private conversation. He wanted to know who these two were and why they were involved in discussions about his team. Invited to sit, Chang listened as the chairman introduced the strangers as longtime acquaintances. Jun Ho-cho turned out to be a manager from the Hunter Association and immediately began enthusiastically praising Chang's matches. Beside him sat a girl glued to her phone as if the entire universe existed inside that screen. The man explained that she was his daughter Hua, also a player, currently burned out and in need of a change of pace. The girl looked cold and closed off, clearly uninterested in small talk or bonding. The chairman added that she competed in the first division and was nearly the same age as Chang. He expressed hope that the two young players might connect, though Chang had zero memory of her. As if reading his thoughts, the chairman clarified that she was the youngest first division player and not widely known. Since the weather was clear and warm, the chairman suggested Chang take her for a walk while he finished business with the manager. He even threw in a playful wink, leaving Chang wondering what game the old man was playing. The girl did not look thrilled either, clearly aware she was being nudged into forced socialization. The manager firmly told her to go, as if her opinion carried no weight. They began walking around the massive estate, the pleasant weather almost inviting conversation. Chang's first instinct, however, was to analyze her abilities with his habitual calculating gaze. Despite her fragile appearance, she possessed serious strength and skill that outclassed many players. She seemed like a versatile powerhouse, likely trained under strict supervision from her father since childhood. The only thing that unsettled Chang was that he could not remember her from his past life, suggesting she might have disappeared before his rise. While the young pair walked, Chairman Lee tried to uncover the true motive behind this meeting. The manager answered vaguely and asked whether the chairman feared a repeat of the earlier situation involving his daughter. The chairman remembered clearly how she had become the youngest player with dreams of changing the world. She had grown rapidly in power, overcoming obstacles and sharpening her skills at near-accelerated speed. Yet she never reached the top of the rankings and gradually began losing faith in herself. Everyone called her a genius, but unfortunately she had hit her ceiling and stalled. As a father, the manager worried deeply, knowing that realizing one's limit can crush the spirit. He hoped that interacting with Chang might reignite her competitive fire and hunger to grow. Chairman Lee agreed it was an interesting move and expressed hope for a positive outcome. Meanwhile, Chang wanted to understand what was truly going on with her and decided to gently provoke a small conflict to observe her reaction. He bluntly asked her whether she truly believed she still had room to grow, or if she had already hit her ceiling and maxed out her rank. The question made her tense instantly, and she stared at him in silence while he met her gaze calmly and without a hint of doubt. Without breaking eye contact, Chang pressed further, asking if she really possessed what it took to become the best of the best. Irritated and exhausted by her own stagnation, she stepped toward him with anger, as if ready to crush him with a single word. She snapped that he knew nothing about her journey and should stay out of her business, and he coolly replied that her sour expression already said everything. Fully enraged, she decided to walk away, unwilling to let some upstart dig into an old wound. Chang wanted his first impression to hit hard and stick, and from her reaction he confirmed that her personality was anything but simple. Returning to the men, he calmly stated that she had gone off in another direction, prompting her father to hurry after her. The chairman questioned why Chang had acted so harshly, knowing she was already struggling. Chang answered that the whole introduction stunt had been their idea, and he had no intention of babysitting anyone. He viewed her as a spoiled child with everything except the true hunger to fight and grow. The chairman flinched and nearly dropped his cup, realizing that trying to pair them up might have been rushed. In any case, it was time to return to team matters since their personal connection had clearly failed. Chang reported that things were stable and strong, with the team holding first place, though 2 decisive games remained. The chairman nodded and reminded him that climbing to the top is easier than staying there. He noted that the bomb strategy was flashy and powerful, yet its weaknesses had surfaced in the last match. Therefore, the team needed caution and alternative plans, instead of relying on a single trick. When asked whether he understood what required improvement, Chang confidently replied that he always had a backup plan. However, the chairman warned that trying to compensate for every weakness alone could lead to serious consequences, especially now that opponents were fully aware of Chang's abilities and would craft strategies specifically against him. The chairman added that a leader cannot carry everything alone, because if he gets locked down by a strong rival, the team could collapse. Chang listened carefully, knowing the words of a first-generation veteran were too logical to ignore. He wanted a near-perfect path unlike his previous life, and for that he needed guidance like this. Hearing advice from someone who lived in an era where mistakes cost lives held real weight for him. Chang reflected that while defeat damages authority, maintaining the summit matters far more. Meanwhile, the manager caught up to his daughter, who had stormed off in frustration. She could not understand why her father had forced her to meet that overconfident guy. The manager apologized softly, explaining he only wanted to help and maybe that boy could shake her awake. She no longer cared, stating briefly that she was going home and saw no reason to stay. Back home, she opened her laptop and began researching that same arrogant player. Reading articles and match reports, she struggled to believe how much Chang had achieved in such a short time. The fact that Japanese star Takumi Minamino had acknowledged him forced her to reconsider. The facts were undeniable as their paths looked eerily similar with early starts, rapid climbs, and loud successes. She nearly cried, not from jealousy but from confronting her own emptiness and exhaustion. With eyes closed, she remembered how easily and quickly she had once risen toward the top. In her early battles, she defeated opponents effortlessly as if victory were natural. But the first division proved far harsher, and accepting she was not ready for that level crushed her. Overconfidence and complacency backfired, and a streak of losses dragged her into apathy. Then some third division guy dared to say she lacked the strength to go further. His words stung deeply, yet she had no reply and simply walked away holding back emotion. She told herself he was just a lower division player unworthy of her attention. However, recalling his words reminded her that her old acquaintance Ryu Jajun competed in that same division. Without hesitation, she dialed his number to ask whether he had crossed paths with Chang in battle. Meanwhile, Chang headed to training, determined to boost his players' independence. The chairman's words echoed in his mind, pushing him to develop each member's personal strength. Together with the coach, he observed practice and realized not everyone's progress was steady. The coach noted that Han Gyol seemed stuck lately and showed little visible growth. He even suggested the guy just needed to eat more like some Pokemon tier logic where evolution solves everything. Chang barely suppressed irritation, finding it absurd to hear such conclusions from someone calling himself a coach. Chang knew the issue was not Han Gyol's talent, but the fact that he had boxed himself in with fear and self-doubt. His telekinesis gave the entire squad control over space itself, yet he stubbornly trained swordsmanship in parallel, allowing him to command multiple blades at once. His telekinetic power was monstrously strong with near-limitless offensive potential, but in pure fencing, he was clearly a step behind. That inner split left him stuck in a mental pit, unsure which path to prioritize without sacrificing the other. After finishing training, he stepped out of the hall and noticed his coach and Chang watching his every move like hawks. Chang was not in the best mood, and bluntly stated he had come to check progress and would now do so regularly. He added that lately Han Gyol had been overthinking and losing focus at critical moments. Chang knew the words stung, but the team had reached a new tier and sugarcoating was no longer an option. This was the Pro League, and to elevate both telekinesis and fencing, he would have to scrap old habits and rebuild his style from zero. In that instant, Han Gyol realized he needed a complete shift in perspective regarding his own abilities. Sharp enough to catch the meaning instantly, he understood, and Chang felt relief knowing at least one player could adapt that fast. The coach stood stunned by the short yet heavy exchange as Han Gyol, newly fired up, sprinted back into training. The next session would pit him against a close combat specialist, and if he truly understood, results had to follow. Brimming with fresh resolve, Han Gyol entered the training chamber where his sparring partner was already waiting. He launched the swords one by one instead of all at once, disrupting rhythm and striking from unpredictable angles. Watching closely, Chang frowned, unsure why that specific attack order had been chosen. Han felt frustrated with himself, believing he still fell short of the level Chang Hyun's weapon mastery represented. He mentally commanded the blades to fly like bullets from an automatic rifle, aiming straight for the mark. Chang exhaled in irritation because brute force was not the goal, and he needed Han to think creatively and flexibly with the blades. Meanwhile, the fiery blonde finally reached her old acquaintance and decided to confront things directly. With a faint smirk, she reminded him that losing to a third division player meant the opponent must have been legit strong. The guy started making excuses, claiming he was caught off guard and suddenly lost control of the flow. He abruptly ended the call and she smirked again, knowing she had hit a nerve. Memories resurfaced of past training sessions with Ryu Ja-jun under the chairman, when he had seemed untouchable. But her temper flared again, and she chose to focus solely on herself, heading straight to the training center. To become a great hunter requires talent first and foremost, because without that innate spark you can fall behind forever. That talent must exist from birth and be refined step by step until it reaches league-level heights. Yet talent alone is only part of the equation and guarantees nothing long-term. The world is filled with gifted players, and raw ability is far from rare. Even the most talented prodigy will fail without discipline and the willingness to correct mistakes. Chang reflected on his all-seeing eye that let him read others' potential while his own limits remained hidden. He believed the most gifted person alive would amount to nothing if they failed to cultivate their skills systematically. Since the league values teams capable of shifting a division's balance, Chang decided to personally refine Han Gyul. He stepped into the training duel with a sword drawn, waiting for the first strike from the approaching student. On Han's command, a blade shot toward Chang, who deflected it effortlessly while already calculating the next move. The swords kept flying one after another, revealing that the student was beginning to grasp the lesson. Chang saw the effort burning in Han and was glad those weaknesses surfaced in practice rather than in an official match. Gradually, Han Gyul realized abandoning his old style was not weakness but evolution. Still sensing incomplete understanding, Chang decided to test him in a direct one-on-one duel. During this session, the blonde entered the hall and saw Chang personally coaching his teammate, sparking curiosity. She felt mild irritation since she had come only to grind a few ranked matches and cool off. Curiosity won, and she stayed to judge Chang's coaching with her own eyes. Observing closely, she thought Han's movements were sloppy, and his blade throws lacked precision. It seemed odd to her that he could not control the swords more sharply. She watched like a hawk, mentally analyzing every move and miscalculation. Deep down, she believed she could handle those abilities better if they were hers. Just as she prepared to leave, she saw Gyul dash back into the arena, unwilling to stop. In this round, the blades sliced through the air faster. Impacts grew harsher, and tension thickened. She watched in genuine surprise as a single piece of advice had already boosted his level. Her gaze followed the dynamic between Chang and Han, as the latter once again approached for guidance. After a brief exchange, they headed together toward the training capsule to drill new combinations and lock in the progress. She noticed the blade control had become razor sharp, and the guy was now piercing blind spots in enemy defense like a sniper threading a needle. At that moment, she saw Chang stepping out of the capsule and, from fragments of conversation, realized they were discussing an upcoming ranked match. Han Gyul was set to face a shield and sword fighter from the First Division, low-ranked but battle-hardened. She was convinced Han would lose even with 3 swords, since their combat styles clashed too heavily. The First Division player charged aggressively, shouting that without his blades, Han was nothing. Han locked in, directing his swords with restraint, precision, and an almost elegant rhythm. The smug opponent kept pressing harder, insisting that telekinetic tricks would not save him. From the outside, it looked like Han had no winning path left, and she assumed the outcome was sealed. But he still held a hidden card, and the instant his opponent relaxed, he chose to flip it. The enemy jerked back in panic as a blade froze inches from his chest. It was already too late, as perfect control sent the sword flashing into its mark and dropping him instantly. She felt irritation spike, unable to grasp how such a decisive strike had slipped through so easily. Curiosity gnawed at her because she knew she had missed something crucial in how Han executed that precision hit. That was when it clicked that these were the exact methods Chang used to turn an average squad into potential champions. A few days later, another match took place before the showdown with Rix, and evaluating Han Gyul's progress became critical. The team had to apply everything they had learned to avoid embarrassing themselves against a serious opponent. This time, Chang shifted tactics and scrapped the bomb swords, letting the core players shine directly. He treated the battle like a dress rehearsal, ordering the rest to cover the key fighters from the rear. After scanning the map, Chang spotted a cluster of enemies positioned perfectly for an opening strike. The blonde prince dashed forward without consulting anyone, fueled by hype and overconfidence. The team had no idea what he was planning, but stopping him was impossible because he wanted the spotlight. In the next second, he drew a radiant blade and shouted the name of his move as a blinding flash exploded outward. Most of the team instinctively turned away, losing orientation in the overwhelming light. The prince wore sunglasses, so his own weapon's brilliance did not faze him. Watching this, Chang knew the prince loved center stage and just hoped the others were prepared. No one else had shades, and they squinted desperately, trying to locate enemies through the glare. Chang froze for a split second but quickly regained focus, aware their opponents were not top-tier elites. He knew that after all the training, their trio ranked among the best prepared in the 3rd division. The prince swung his glowing blade confidently, shouting victory lines like the fight was already won. The enemies, however, did not flinch, and instead laughed at his flashy display. They had anticipated the move and equipped dark glasses, nullifying his technique entirely. The blonde was stunned, realizing he had been outplayed, and his plan evaporated for a moment. Their laughter amplified the pressure, exposing how awkward his position had become. He stepped back, scrambling to recalibrate and find an exit strategy. The opponents kept taunting him, inviting him to continue the show and laughing straight at him. With no alternative, he executed a tactical retreat from the front line. The team stood in shocked silence, secretly relieved they were no longer blinded by that nuclear glow. Once again, Chang confirmed that the prince could irritate both allies and enemies in equal measure. After Dojun's retreat, the 2 remaining players shifted smoothly into coordinated team tactics. Telekinesis became a nightmare for the opponents, who could not keep up with constantly shifting blade trajectories. Despite the chaos, the team secured the win in the end. Chang worried most about Gil Han, since he lacked overwhelming natural talent. Yet the training helped him realize that discipline and style reinvention were the true road to victory. The battle with Rix loomed ahead, and the team gathered for a strategic council. The head coach of Rix could not comprehend how former underdogs had suddenly turned into a real threat. He knew that if Chang kept winning, his own squad might slide down the rankings. Determined, he resolved to secure victory at any cost. The blonde, noticing anxiety in her teammates' eyes, stood sharply and scolded them for their cowardice. She declared she would never lose to that annoying Chang and that their team could handle his tricks. The coach nodded, aware that they had Hyo Ju on their side, a figure who could become for them what Chang had become for PER. The man admitted the girl had a point, realizing they should not fear the opponent nor play by rules forced upon them. He broke it down simply. They win with precision and calculation, while the others rely on stamina and rush into clinches. Back home, the girl could not get Chang out of her head, sitting at her computer for hours digging into every detail about him. Interviews with strong opponents did not impress her, because words are cheap and almost impossible to verify. What truly unsettled her was what she witnessed in training, since Chang proved genuinely powerful both as a coach and as a fighter. She rewatched nearly every match he played, hunting for patterns in his decisions and methods. It felt beyond her grasp, and she remembered Minseon once mentioning a strange guy from the 3rd division. She messaged her friend, hoping for clarity about her doubts and growing curiosity. The friend replied that she knew little herself, but rumors about his strength were serious. She added that if more insight was needed, they could ask Gion Tae, who had already faced Chang in battle. It surprised her that a national-level player even knew a so-called kid from the 3rd division. She wrestled internally, unsure whether Chang was truly that great or simply wrapped in hype. Eventually, she shifted to action, drafting a detailed plan for the upcoming match and scanning for weaknesses. She understood that PER's core power rested on 4 rookies with genuinely dangerous abilities. Her calculations showed that close combat required aggression, while Chang's firepower could be neutralized with fortified cover. She analyzed each player carefully, noting that Han Gyol was crafty, even with 3 blades and skilled at tempo shifts. Ji Su-doo's gravity control and Do Jun's radiant blade seemed manageable as long as focus was maintained. When the analysis ended, her fear faded and the battle no longer looked overwhelming. She now saw vulnerabilities in PER and felt confident her team could exploit them. She constructed a strategy she believed Chang could not predict due to limited experience against 1st Division squads. Fierce determination burned in her eyes as she longed to defeat those cocky rookies and especially put Chang in his place. She compiled the analysis into a long message to her coach, surprising him with its depth. He admitted the plan was solid and that the cover tactic could preserve lives early in the fight. When she arrived to discuss it in person, the coach was glad to see her motivated and confident again. That same night, Dojun stumbled upon harsh comments about the last game, and they cut deep. Fans mocked him relentlessly, and the internet dragged him faster than a viral cancellation storm. He knew he could not abandon the Radiant Sword because he had tied his identity too tightly to that image. What hurt most was the team's cold reaction, as they barely spoke to him anymore. The prince approached them to apologize for his ego and reckless move. In return, he received only dry replies with teammates eager to end the conversation. He felt crushed, genuinely believing he had fought well against multiple enemies. Reflecting deeply, he realized others were improving while he seemed frozen in place. He decided he had to change something and prove he deserved his spot. A strange idea formed in his mind to make his technique invisible, even to prepared opponents. Yet he had no clear roadmap, and his thoughts tangled without direction. Before the match, the team gathered in the living room to finalize strategy and roles. Chang explained that the opponent would likely play tank style with heavy defense and calculated strikes. Players debated and refined options because a serious opponent awaited them. They knew the enemy had studied their tricks and prepared counters. Chang proposed shifting tempo by launching an aggressive assault immediately after the first bombardment. That required flawless execution from everyone because mistakes would be fatal. Everyone noticed the prince looked tense and unusually quiet, his gaze uneasy. Chang caught the shift and recognized it as fallout from the recent failure. Aware of his need for attention, Chang chose not to press further to avoid worsening things. He assigned roles clearly and reminded each member that distractions were unacceptable. After the meeting, the team dispersed to prepare and gather gear. The prince still felt anxious but secretly aimed to shock everyone with his growth. Match day arrived, and the arena was a massive virtual city packed with cover. The confrontation promised to be a turning point that could reshape the division's hierarchy. The entire world watched as commentators speculated wildly about who would claim victory. The commentators stressed that the opening strike would decide everything, as the raw power of both squads was bound to set the tempo for the entire clash. The match kicked off, and Chang instantly asked Yeonju for enemy positions and headcount at their current location. She fired back precise coordinates, and Chang ordered a lightning-fast assault the moment the first explosion landed. Chang muttered in irritation that 3rd Division maps were too clean, with no side threats and everything boiling down to pure team collision. The gap between divisions was never just about player skill alone. The real difference lived inside the arenas, where 3rd Division maps stayed simple, with barely any monsters and almost zero traps. Starting from 2nd Division, maps unleashed deadly creatures and layered mechanics that cranked the difficulty to brutal levels. Thinking about that, Chang closed in on his squad, knowing this win could elevate them to a whole new tier. He confirmed whether the enemies were still holding position because it felt like they were baiting the first move. The logic checked out since their chosen cover was small and perfect for waiting out the right moment. Everything stayed on script for now as the team remained calm and braced for the push. The explosives were locked and ready, needing only precise deployment. When the bomb swords launched forward, Chang sensed something off because it all looked too smooth. It felt suspicious that the enemies made zero moves while lethal projectiles flew straight at them. Even a shield with boosted recovery could not tank direct annihilation. The bombs kept advancing as the girl counted down the seconds to impact with surgical focus. Chang grew uneasy at their composure since the enemies stood frozen like they owned a hidden trump card. Activating his analytical skill, he spotted a concealed ability on one of them. It was time control, and the guy moved like Dr. Strange minus the charisma and billion-dollar hype. That was why the attack failed to break through, as the opponent briefly twisted the flow of events itself. Chang quickly briefed the team and announced a shift in plans because the enemy could become temporarily untouchable. Now it made sense why they had chosen open ground for the showdown. A few teammates faltered as their blueprint for a quick win crumbled instantly. Chang immediately ordered a retreat to reassess options. Within seconds, a massive arrow of devastating force smashed into the building. The deafening blast rang through their ears and stole their balance for a heartbeat. On the enemy side stood a hulking mechanism launching gigantic ballistic arrows. Chang had expected anything but a ballistic turret entering the fight. Just when it seemed the worst had passed, the situation escalated even further. Chang signaled everyone to split up and stay as far from the enemy formation as possible. He ordered them to draw fire intentionally and use reload gaps for sharp counterattacks. Each player scattered to avoid being wiped out by a single crushing volley. Chang knew this was one of the toughest matches of their entire season. He made it clear that the stronger the opponent, the higher the risk of collapse. Yet retreat was not an option. Meanwhile, the girl exhaled because her calculations were unfolding exactly as planned. She knew their explosive charges were limited, giving her a strategic edge. Now that she understood their attack pattern, victory felt far closer than at the start. Her teammate ordered minimal chatter and immediate ballistic launches the second they reloaded. The arrows shot out at blistering speed along precise trajectories, carving destruction into the field. Chang's team reacted fast and dispersed to avoid becoming easy targets. Another shot thundered out, and this time a PER player took the hit. Chang realized that running meant getting picked off one by one, while grouping meant instant annihilation. The prince's voice crackled in the comms, promising to handle everything solo with the energy of a tech mogul hyping a miracle launch. Chang paused for a split second before calmly placing trust in him because battle was unavoidable anyway. He tightened his grip on his pistols, ready to fight to the end knowing even defeat would be a lesson. He ordered everyone to put on protective glasses and brace for another blinding flash. Chang deliberately baited the enemies into firing at him to open a window for retaliation. The moment the arrow launched, allies who had crept into position unleashed their counteroffensive. Chaos erupted as opponents lunged forward in bursts, trying to shatter their formation. Chang plunged into combat but suddenly realized that Dojun had vanished from sight. Just minutes ago, he had sworn to do anything for the win, and now he had vanished like smoke in the wind. Out of nowhere, something tore through an enemy's abdomen, spraying crimson arcs across the battlefield. The squad froze in confusion, catching only a blinding flash like a miniature sun detonating midair. In the chaos, Chang caught a single detail that sent ice crawling down his spine. Before millions of viewers, the roles flipped in an instant, and the entire momentum of the match reversed. The opponents failed to grasp what happened, but instinctively tightened formation and refused to scatter. Han Gyul could not believe his eyes and checked with Chang, only to realize everyone had witnessed the same impossible strike. A sword materialized from nowhere, split an enemy in a lightning arc, and vanished just as suddenly. Chang ordered an immediate assault before the enemy could regroup from the shock. The players were close enough to unleash their full arsenal without restraint. Yet Chang kept analyzing, trying to decode the nature of that lethal phantom blade. As suspected, beneath the cloak stood the blonde prince, looking like a discount wizard without the school or the brains. Dojun had clearly mapped out a method to eliminate enemies surgically while never obstructing his allies. Chang approved silently, finally understanding what had distracted him during the strategy meeting. The fight turned cinematic, and spectators gasped when a Rix fighter dropped inside what was supposed to be a safe shelter. No one could explain it because the attacker remained completely unseen. At last, viewers spotted Dojun moving under an invisibility cloak and striking with pinpoint precision. Their goggles were tuned to filter blinding flashes and suppress artifact distortions. Because of that calibration, the cloak did not flicker, leaving them staring at empty space instead of a target. Their situation spiraled fast because fighting an invisible enemy felt like swinging at ghosts. One desperate player ripped off his goggles trying to locate the glowing blade wielder. The prince wasted no time, revealing himself for a split second and detonating a flash straight into the enemy's eyes. Rix crumbled almost entirely, bodies down and shields useless against the invisible executioner. The wounded girl burned with rage, convinced her calculations had been flawless. The prince radiated pure hype, feeling like the mastermind and undisputed hero of the match. He launched himself skyward like a comic book Avenger, lining up the final strike with dramatic precision. One perfect throw cut the air with a sharp whistle, sparks flaring as the last opponent fell. After a brutal and nerve-shredding clash, PER secured a hard-earned victory. When it was over, Chang admitted he had briefly entertained the thought of defeat. Exhaling slowly, he realized he had been wrong to shoulder everything alone. The blonde removed the cloak, and no one could quite read the storm brewing behind his eyes. Chang openly acknowledged that today's win owed much to the prince's play. Confidence restored, the young hero let go of his earlier failure and embraced the proof of his worth. Back in the real world, the team dissected the fight intensely, admitting they had been inches from collapse. Naturally, the blonde jumped in, unable to resist reclaiming center stage. He expected thunderous praise and confirmation that without him, they would have been finished. Instead, the team reminded him how he had blinded them not long ago with his flashy stunt. Everyone knew he chased glory and applause at any cost. They also pointed out he had failed to warn them about the artifact plan. The blonde defended himself with the logic that to fool the enemy, sometimes even allies must be kept in the dark. Chang listened in silence and agreed with the team's criticism. Seconds later, the prince was summoned for an MVP interview and practically glowed with pride. Promising to join shortly, he dashed toward the host with puppy-like excitement. Watching him go, Chung decided to forgive the arrogance because the victory truly carried his imprint. Dujun felt certain the interview would shine and had rehearsed his lines in advance. He declared the match phenomenal because the team's star, meaning himself, had finally stepped into the spotlight. The teammates watched and chuckled quietly at his smug grin that bordered on parody. The host asked what he enjoyed most about the game. Without hesitation, he credited the moment he personally carried the squad to victory. The guys just shook their heads, amused by the self-obsessed kid who, despite everything, had saved their skins.